I don't play with lions. I don't play with those. I don't even do roller coasters. Wow.
Well, hello.
All right, welcome to the Young Turks. Cenk Uygur and Kasparian with you guys. So full day of news, of course. We've got more fallout from the Charlie Kirk assassination, the tragedy in and of itself, and then also, of course, on top of that, the consequences that are going to flow from that, which might be a separate tragedy, a personal tragedy for Kash Patel in that his days might be numbered as the head of the FBI. We'll talk about that and the people pushing for it. Unfortunately, tragedy continues in Gaza, and the peace talks appear to be completely dead. And then on top of that, we have the former head of the IDF admitting to unreal atrocities. So that and a lot more on today's program. Anna, before we get started, how are you doing?
Don't ask me that because not good, but let's just move on. I'm just really sad at like where the country is right now. You know, I was just talking to our producer, Kate, about it. And I'm worried. I'm like worried about the future of the country. I'm worried about what's happening in the Middle East. Obviously, I've been worried about that. And, you know, I'm doing my best to keep it together. I want to get the news to our audience. But what I hope to do, guys, through the work that we do here at TYT is to try to make things better, try to get people in this country to see each other as human beings before a political identity or a political label. The fact that anyone on the left right now is celebrating the murder of someone they disagree with really breaks my heart because I thought the left would be better than that. And I think the majority of the left, you know, people that we don't hear from have been good on this issue and they do not celebrate the murder of someone that they disagree with politically. But it does break my heart that some of the most prominent streamers, content creators have been putting out some stuff out that I don't know where I belong. And that's another thing. Like all of this is just kind of doubling down on how homeless I feel politically. And that's a really difficult place to be because you have nothing to root for. You have, I don't know. There's no figure or there's no political party I can look to right now and feel inspired by. And that's really hard to do, or a hard place to be in. So that's how I'm doing, Cenk. I didn't expect you to ask me that question, so sorry for the whole spiel.
No problem. So somebody's asking me in the member section, and we'll get to it later in the show about it. You know, how did I feel about getting ambushed on Piers Morgan the other day with Dave Rubin, and then you were on Piers Morgan today, and it's just a lot of callousness in a lot of directions here. And I'm an enormous believer that the radicals do not represent the left or the right. And so when you say that about one side, that side goes, oh yeah, no way, the radicals are a tiny part of us. When you say it about the other side, they go, no way, the radicals are huge, almost all of the other side. That can't really be right. So I think the radicals are small, but super loud. And so one of the things we're trying to do here is get past that. Radical used to be being for universal health care. Like that was a radical position 10 years ago. Now radical means that you want to murder the other side, apparently, right? For some people, obviously not for others who call themselves radical for other reasons, good reasons, etc. But we're in a mess here. Let's try to sort it out. Let's do the news today.
All right, let's get to our first story.
Our universities, in many cases, have become incubators for extremism. They become the equivalent of madrasas for jihadism. The power of law enforcement under President Trump's leadership will be used to find you, will be used to take away your money, take away your power, and if you've broken the law, to take away your freedom, Sean.
Well, as you just heard from Stephen Miller, it really didn't take long for members of the Trump administration to exploit the murder of Charlie Kirk to essentially roll back rights of Americans under this guise of fighting terrorism. And I remember back in 2003, right before the preemptive war in Iraq, this need of the Bush administration to start using the label of terrorist in order to justify their actions, I knew somewhere down the line that would come back to haunt the American people. And here we are today. Now, this again is reminiscent, if you ask me, of the aftermath of 9/11. Only this time the government is labeling half the population of the United States as terrorists, essentially. Let's hear more from Miller.
There is a domestic terrorism movement in this country. When you see these organized doxing campaigns where the left calls people enemies of the republic, calls them fascists, says they're Nazis, says they're evil, says they have to be removed, and then prints their addresses, what do you think they're trying to do? They are trying to inspire someone to murder them. That is their objective. That is their intent. And when you see online, Sean, as we've seen for the last few days, tape after tape after tape of federal workers, bureaucrats, staffers in the Pentagon, educators, professors, healthcare workers, nurses, celebrating the assassination of Charlie Kirk. These are radicalized people. There is a domestic terrorism movement in this country.
So I want to be clear. I am personally disgusted with the celebrations of Charlie Kirk's murder. I think if you value humanity and human life, you wouldn't celebrate someone getting gunned down like that in front of his family, in front of thousands of people. If you saw the video of him getting shot in the neck, which I unfortunately did see, you wouldn't be celebrating that, okay? There's something going on if you're unable to see Charlie Kirk as a human being, something outside of his political views. At the same time, though, I don't think that you have to necessarily mourn, right? If Charlie Kirk wasn't close to you, his death isn't necessarily impacting you. Okay, like you don't have to mourn, but don't go out of your way to celebrate it. That being said, labeling people as domestic terrorists and then threatening to do away with some of their rights is something that really concerns me. And in a moment of anger, in a moment of rage, some Americans might sign off on something like that. But take a listen to what Stephen Miller has to say, what he wants the Trump administration to do.
Under President Trump's leadership, I don't care how, it could be a RICO charge, a conspiracy charge, conspiracy against the United States, insurrection, but we are going to do what it takes to dismantle the organizations and the entities that are fomenting riots, that are doxing, that are trying to inspire terrorism, and that are committing acts of wanton violence. It has to stop. And my message is to all of the domestic terrorists in this country spreading this evil hate, you want us to live in fear? We will not live in fear, but you will live in exile. Because the power of law enforcement under President Trump's leadership will be used to find you, will be used to take away your money, take away your power, and if you've broken the law, to take away your freedom, Sean.
So there you have Stephen Miller threatening to debank Americans. You have, by the way, it's really important to note how easy it is to just label anyone a terrorist. Right, that's the problem. The vague way in which that label is kind of slapped onto anyone. And look, I think doxing is disgusting regardless of who does it. So please don't dox. If you're on the left, please don't dox. If you're on the right, please don't dox people. However, at the same time, years ago, I remember covering a story about Turning Point USA and how they literally had published a list of professors for people to target. Okay, I wouldn't call for someone to be assassinated or to have their rights taken away for doing that. But I do think we need to have some sort of regulation, some sort of federal law that prevents doxing from happening, or at least codifies specifically what the consequences or penalties will be if you are doxing people with the intention of directing violence toward them. But see, that would be, trying to find a reasonable solution to an ongoing problem that I've seen on both the left and the right. But that's not what Stephen Miller and the Trump administration are interested in doing here. And so I'm worried about what the fallout is going to be and what kind of actions the Trump administration is going to take that could potentially roll back the rights of American citizens.
Yeah, and I'm going to be a little bit harsher in both directions. So first of all, no, you don't have to mourn the death of Charlie Kirk. We all disagreed with Charlie on 80, 90% of things, I suppose. Or maybe it wasn't that high, but it was certainly very intense on the things that we did disagree on, right? But I think you should mourn it. And it's not because that means you love the guy or that you agree with him. And you certainly don't have to lionize him and say, oh, okay, now I'm going to say that all of his opinions were correct. That doesn't make any sense. If you thought they were incorrect last week, you presumably thought they are incorrect this week, right? Nobody's asking you to change your mind on any policy or anything. But if you can't feel some degree of sympathy or empathy for a young person that was shot and killed and left behind a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old and a wife and had a life ahead of him, then I'm worried about you. I'm worried that we've lost some moral thread there. Okay, so how do you know what Charlie Kirk was going to stay his whole life? So for example, we interviewed him at the RNC-DNC and we found out that he had a couple of shocking changes and that he realized that corporate rule was a real problem. And we talked about many different things, housing, blah, 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 right? The specifics are not important. The important part was, oh, look at that. He changed his mind a little bit on a couple of issues, not all the issues. In my lifetime, I used to be a Republican, I became a Democrat, and I rail against both parties, et cetera. We all grow, we change. And even if we don't, I mean, that's a young man who is dead, who was shot through the neck. I'm worried about the left if we can't muster up some degree of sympathy or empathy for that, not for his opinions, not for his policies, but for his gruesome, horrific death. Aren't we supposed to be the folks who are on the side of empathy? So, okay, now I say that to the folks that are a small minority of people who apparently can't muster up that empathy, right? But it's a giant problem for us in all of politics that we take the extremes on both sides and pretend that it's the entirety of that side. So here we are again doing the same exact mistake. So I saw some of the videos of people celebrating. I thought it was disgusting. And I saw the jokes people were making about the next shot. I mean, horrific. Jesus Christ, man. If you're on the left, you're against all violence and in favor of humanity and decency. So those people, I got no problem condemning them super strongly. And that is sick, and there's something a little disconnected with you if that's how you're feeling. I feel like we've dehumanized all of ourselves. Everybody's the enemy now. And if they're the enemy, they're not quite as human as you. We see that in war, now we're seeing it at home. So I'm deeply bothered by it, for however small that percentage might be. So now to the right-wing reaction. What is this? Now we're gonna shut down freedom of speech? Now, whether you believe him or not, Charlie Kirk's #1 issue was free speech. And like if you ask anyone on the right, they'd tell you Charlie was for freedom of speech. Now, again, you could say, hey, I found instances where he was hypocritical and this and that and the other thing, but it doesn't matter. He wanted his legacy to be free speech. The right wing believed that his legacy is free speech. Okay, great. I'm in favor of free speech, and I was against cancel culture the whole time, and we were principled against it. We were principled against it during when Democrats were in charge and when Republicans were in charge. So unfortunately, now this is a much higher percentage. A huge percentage of the left said no, if they don't agree with us, there should be some sort of consequences. Okay, that's hate speech. It should be banned, etc. I'll just speak for myself. I was a rare voice that said, yes, so what? Okay, they offended us. They said terrible things. We fight back by, nobody's taking our speech away. we get to fight back and win those debates, right? But a lot of people said, nope, take him off of social media, do this, deplatform, get rid of him. Megyn Kelly shouldn't be on NBC. Charlie Kirk, Ben Shapiro, et cetera, shouldn't be on college campuses. And we fought back against that because being principled matters. So unfortunately, I think the left lost their principles when they were in power, and now we turn to the right. And what happened? I thought you guys said you were all about freedom of speech. Charlie said it, Trump said it over and over again. Trump ran 2 elections on that, 2020 and 2024. But now you're in power, and all of a sudden, we're gonna cancel people based on who Stephen Miller thinks might be aiding and abetting terrorists. In his mind, domestic terrorists. And now tons of people in power, not randos, are saying the left are domestic terrorists. Nah, this is exactly how you lose your freedom. And then if the Democrats get back in charge, then the 2 sides will flip. And then the right will go, no more free speech, no cancel culture. And the left will go back to, no more free speech. I hate it, I can't stand it. It's called principles. Look into it. And if you're the right wing now, this is the perfect time to show your principles. If you don't come back to me later when you're in the minority. Now, I'll still have the same position no matter what anybody says, right? But this is the time to prove yourself. And guys, who do you think Stephen Miller is gonna say is aiding and abetting terrorism? We're gonna have a whole different story about this because they're literally planning to pass this law. It's being introduced in the House now, and it would give Marco Rubio the power to decide unilaterally. Of course, the first people they're gonna say is anyone opposing Israel. That's it, you're canceled. Whether you're on the left, the right, it doesn't matter. Take away your passport, take away your ability to speak. And did you notice what Stephen Miller said? We're gonna take away your money and power first. And then if you broke the law, we're gonna take away your freedom. So you don't have to break the law at all for them to take your money and your power. And so if you say, it's okay, it's only gonna happen to the left, I'm not on the left. Wait a minute. Nick Fuentes said that Charlie Kirk was a fascist, so that's it. All his rights and all the rights of everybody who follows him, that's gone, apparently, if you believe this ideology. Laura Loomer, right before Charlie Kirk was killed, said that he was a traitor and stabbed Trump in the back. So are we taking away her rights? Are we taking away, and who is she anyway? Is she in the pro-Israel camp? Is she in the MAGA camp? Should we take away their rights? None of this makes any sense. You shouldn't take away anyone's rights, and you should be absolutely horrified by what happened to Charlie Kirk.
You either are a supporter of liberal democracy or you're not. It's that simple. And I never thought I would ever fear the loss of our liberal democracy, but for the first time ever, I'm actually fearful of that. I really am. You have a group of people who are calling for a monarchy, absolute doofuses like Curtis Yarvin. I laughed about it. How laughable is it to think that Americans would want to be ruled by a monarchy? But little by little, we are losing our rights. The rhetoric from thought leaders, from the elite, from those who actually hold positions of power has become less democratic, more authoritarian in regard to doing away with certain constitutional rights. And look, aside from systems of government, aside from politics, again, I just really want to drill into people's minds. The notion of nonviolence and the value of human life. I am not interested in working with anyone who doesn't value human life. I am ready and willing to debate anyone. I'm ready and willing to engage in a war of words with political detractors, those I disagree with. And the whole point of a liberal democracy is to allow you to articulate your arguments, make a case for your beliefs, and engage in the art of persuasion. And whatever you might think about Charlie Kirk, he provided a platform for people to do that. It wasn't to convince Charlie Kirk per se. It was an effort to reach out to a completely different group of people, his supporters, who may have never heard of left-wing arguments articulated the way that we might want to articulate them. Murder, violence, those types of acts, in my opinion, are the acts of cowards, of people who are not confident enough in their beliefs to articulate them and persuade. And I'm terrified about what the future of this country holds, to be honest with you. I really am. That doesn't mean you're erasing or laundering some of the incendiary or inflammatory things Charlie Kirk said throughout his career. It just means that you are willing to engage politically through debate rather than devolve into a culture of disgusting violence and murder.
Yeah, it's just not hard at all. So Charlie Kirk said a lot of things that were offensive about Muslims, including Islam being the sword against the West's neck, right? Okay, so grew up Muslim, I'm from a Muslim family, I'm an atheist now, but so obviously me, my family, et cetera, can take great offense at that, and it is offensive. But they were just words. And so people say, well, he was trying to influence people in the wrong direction. That's right, that's why we're here, trying to influence people in the right direction. And that's called America. And yes, some of those words are also incendiary and allusions to violence, et cetera. And that's not great, but guys, they were just words. No, words is not violence, violence is violence. The only time words become violence is when you point to someone and you say, you should go harm them, you should go hurt them. Then that's a significant problem. No one should do that. But if you're generalizing, saying, okay, I don't like Muslims, I don't like black people, I don't like white people, et cetera. That sucks, that's a terrible thing to say. But so what? Oh, my feelings were hurt, so what? You fight back. You fight back with words, you fight back politically, you fight back with rhetoric. You don't then go, okay, since I was so offended, I murdered you. Well, that's 10,000 times more hateful. How could you not see that murder is infinitely more hateful than words? I mean, look, I think that 99.9% of all of us, including everybody, almost everyone on the left, can easily see that. So we've got to get past these extreme, ludicrous radicals. That includes Stephen Miller. Because did you hear what he said there at the end? He's like, oh, I don't care what law it is, RICO or terrorism law. He hasn't even looked into it. He's not even trying to make it legal. He's just saying, I'm going to invent an excuse and I'm going to lock up people and I'm going to strip them of all, I'm going to rob them of all their money and I'm going to try to drive them into exile if they disagree with me. Because no one's broken the law yet and he doesn't even know which law. He just knows he's going to punish his political enemies. And if anyone on the right actually meant anything about freedom of speech that they said, they would be 100% opposed to what Stephen Miller just said.
Yeah. All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about this like witch hunt that's currently going on, targeting people, private citizens for their posts on social media, getting them fired. We'll give you the details on that and more when we come back.
All right, back on the social break here. I'm gonna read from TYT.com members. Pessimistic Progressive says, I've been thinking about this a lot over the weekend and came across this quote from Marcus Aurelius. Well, so I'm already in, one of my favorite people in history. And he said, quote, the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. As usual, I love that quote from Marcus Aurelius. He was reminding himself that someone else's injustice or cruelty does not excuse us from our own responsibility to live with virtue. To act unjustly in response to injustice only multiplies the wrong. Couldn't agree more. So that's Pessimistic Progressive. That's a beautiful quote and reminder today. That's exactly right. Post-traumatic South Disorder said, the language of the Cultural Revolution, Miller is more terrifying than Trump. Not just because Miller is more intelligent. Unlike Trump, Miller doesn't have the driving need for adoration and prizes. Trump will follow the spotlight. Miller wants to operate in the dark. Guys, Stephen Miller is only a tool, right? And I mean that in both meaning of the word. So either Trump is going to be in charge, or if something goes wrong with Trump, JD Vance is going to be in charge. I thought a lot over the weekend, which is worse, because there's all these rumors about Trump's health, right? And came to the conclusion that Vance is worse. Vance has spoken against liberal democracy, his creation of the bad guys in Silicon Valley, Peter Thiel and the rest. And between Stephen Miller and JD Vance, they will methodically take away our rights and squeeze the vice more and more. Trump is unpredictable and crazy, but he's harder to control and harder for him to successfully, methodically execute any plan. So they're both horrible folks to be in charge, if you ask me. And we try to explain exactly why that is and why we're worried about them taking away American rights. But I think that I'm more worried about the JD Vance, Stephen Miller combination just steamrolling our rights and turning this into an imperial empire. Earthling Dragon says, Anna, I felt homeless politically all my life, and I'm 75 years old. We can show up and do our best regardless. We all have wonderful people in our lives. I think the most negative dominate the public forum. There are more of us that who are true to ourselves and to others. I agree with that too. And that's what we try to do here, and that's why we get oftentimes pounded on all sides. So Shelby says, Anna, I was feeling the exact same way you were last week after spending way too much scrolling through the hellhole that is X. I'm terrified at how divisive we've become, but what does give me comfort is knowing that this TYT community is somewhat of a political home, even if we don't all agree on everything. I thank you for saying that, and that's exactly what we're trying to do here. A political home for people who actually care about issues and want to be decent to one another, and one another is not limited just to our exact ideological silo. It's all of us. We're against violence in all forms, war and here at home, and we're for decency and morality, for equal rights and justice for everyone, not just some, not just the people on our side. Jeremy says, Cenk, you're absolutely right. They are a small but a loud minority. They are the death throes of a way of life that has no place in modern society. Keep going, you two. You give us all hope. Thank you for saying that, Jeremy. Wind Spirit Feathers says, thanks for all you do, Anna and Cenk and TYT. I think you all a lot. I think of you all a lot, and I'm concerned for you and all of us. Mr. In Between says, you're part of the TYT Bull Moose Party, Anna. Okay, that's funny too. Thank you, guys. Back on TYT, Cenk, Anna, and Ziga Butunoid, who just joined on TYT.com. We appreciate you. And Wild Banshee contributed through TYT.com as well. You guys are great. We thank you for looking out for us. CDN Norse Dog Dad also gifted a membership on YouTube. Appreciate you as well. All right, Anna, what's next?
My favorite handle. I love it. Thank you, Norse Dog Dad. All right, well, I want to get to our next story because there is a bit of a witch hunt going on. Let's get into it.
Hi, I'm Rachel, and my name is currently first on a website claiming to expose Charlie Kirk's murderers. You might be wondering how I got here. I'm kind of wondering that too. Let's go to the website and read the screenshots that they included of me celebrating Charlie Kirk's murder. I said I was terrified to think of how far-right fans of Kirk, aching for more violence, could very well turn this into an even more radicalizing moment. Will they now believe their fears have been proven right and feel they have a right to retaliate regardless of who actually was behind the initial shooting?
Well, if you ask me, that is a legitimate concern to have, which is why resorting to political violence, regardless of which side is targeted, is one of the dumbest things that anyone can do. But nonetheless, right-wing activists and some politicians are on a bit of a witch hunt to basically punish anyone they believe either celebrated or made light of the murder of Charlie Kirk. So there's a website called Expose Charlie's Murderers that was launched soon after Charlie Kirk was killed. The Charlie's Murderers site, whose domain was registered anonymously and which says it is not a doxing site, claimed it has received nearly 30,000 submissions, according to a message on the site's front page on midday Saturday. At the time, there were a few dozen submissions published on the site. So the website also stated that they will soon be converted into a searchable database of all 30,000 submissions, filterable by general location and job industry. This is a permanent and continuously updating archive of radical activists calling for violence. Now, listen, the woman that we heard from earlier in the story didn't say anything that I think is radical. She shared a legitimate concern. I don't know if there's anything else she might have posted that led to her being listed on this site, but nonetheless, just earlier we heard from Stephen Miller argue about how doxing is dangerous and how he wants to go after anyone on the left who is doxing right-wingers. Well, here you have private citizens getting doxed on a specific website. And the submissions include social media posts and some private messages from people, many of whom are not public figures. They're private citizens. And according to CNN, most of these people didn't even refer to themselves as activists, nor did they call for violence. So I think that it's disgusting to celebrate someone's murder, but I don't think people need to, mourn Charlie Kirk or lionize Charlie Kirk. I think what happened was wrong. I think what happened was disgusting. I think that it is going to drive this country into a really dangerous place. In fact, I share the concerns that the woman that we just heard from has. But to target private people and do this to them, I think is just fueling this cycle of violence. And I think some of the behavior that we saw, beginning in 2020 in terms of, finding videos of private people acting poorly publicly and getting them fired from their jobs, destroying their lives, has not really done much for the country. It has not improved the country in any way, shape, or form. If anything, I would say that the right is learning from those tactics and now going on a witch hunt against Charlie Kirk's critics.
Yeah, so there's two different issues here. One is going after what I call civilians. You've heard me talking about this on the show for a couple of years now, right? And so on this one, I have to confess that I'm guilty as well. And we've certainly done a lot of it on the network, going after the Karens as an example, right? And then Anna and I got uncomfortable with it a couple of years ago and decided to turn around on that. And that's because, as I was clarifying on the show, these are not political figures. These are not public figures. They're not in media or in politics. They're a rando person who got caught up in some sort of internet controversy. And maybe what they did was outrageous, but we don't know the entire context. Not maybe, oftentimes it was outrageous. But do you know their mental health situation? Do you know the context of the entire exchange, the context of their lives, etc.? Again, if they're in politics and they are powerful and they affect other citizens, well, then they're in the arena in a sense, right? But if you're outside the arena, going after private individuals on the left or the right is we think it's a bad idea, and we've been principled on that once we realized the depth of the problem that it was creating, because it was turning people against one another, against each other as citizens, not just trying to hold the powerful accountable, right? So now there's a second issue as well, which is getting people fired. So that one's a little bit harder, and I'll tell you why. Because I remember when we did that as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And sometimes I think it does make sense. So let me explain that. So when we found, for example, cops who were not around the edges, but clearly racist. You'll see them on tape talking about black people, not only in a derisive way, but saying that they were going to target them, right? So, well, then I can't have a cop who says he's not gonna do his job, but he's gonna do discrimination and pick on people. And I would say that if he was picking on black people, white people, Asian people, it doesn't matter, right? When it comes to teacher, there was a lot of conversation about, do you want a person who's this, racist, if they, again, were clearly proven overwhelmingly and again, very clearly, etc. Do you want them teaching your kids, right? And that's a tough question. Look, because for a lot of us on the left, we didn't think that was a tough question. We said, no, fire them, right? So now we've got folks who said terrible things about the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And if you're on the right and your heart's broken over that and this tragic, killing of a human being, and you see other people gloating and you find out it's a teacher, you find out maybe it's a police officer, whatever it might be, does that give you the same concern that we had when we were saying, hey, maybe some of those folks should be fired? And I think that's a much tougher question. Now, at the same time, guys, So for some sensitive areas like police, military, maybe teachers, maybe healthcare, okay, that's an interesting conversation, right? But if you're talking about accountants or dentists and random professions, let's stop ripping each other apart. Okay, that was a terrible thing you said, little public shaming and we move on. Like otherwise, now we're gonna do witch hunts against not the powerful, but the powerless. And we're just gonna attack each other ad nauseum. That's where it's going, and I hate that. I don't want that to happen.
And besides which, I mean, just based on what I'm seeing in terms of the various people who get listed on this site, some of them were not gloating or celebrating Charlie Kirk's death at all, right? They have other concerns. They have concerns about retaliation from the right that could lead to more violence. And quite frankly, everyone should be concerned about an ongoing cycle of violence, violent retaliation as a result of what happened. And by the way, if you do happen to be someone who identifies on the left and you are celebrating a political assassination, just think about how you would feel if your favorite political figure or your favorite activist was targeted in this type of way, was murdered in cold blood.
Yeah.
So just think about what you're supporting, what kind of cycle of violence you are celebrating and cheering on in this country. Now, real quick, Cenk, I want to note that although this website claims that they're not doxing people, they do include some pretty personal information about the individuals they decide to publish, including their full names, employment details, locations, and social media accounts. And independent journalist Rachel Gilmore sheds light on the type of people who have unfortunately been published on this website.
The flood of threats turned into a tsunami. And as it escalated, I shared that I was scared. Then several massive American right-wing accounts with hundreds of thousands of followers took a screenshot of that and shared it saying I deserved it without showing what I actually said. And suddenly I was like the face of people celebrating Charlie Kirk's murderer, even though that literally never happened. And it's made the last 48 hours of my life a living hell. It's not just me. There are tons of people listed on this site who aren't public figures, who have never dealt with this before, and I am terrified for them. Some of the posts on this website are private messages. People are snitching on folks in their lives. And if they've received what I've received in the last 48 hours, which I'm sure they have, I'm so worried about them. People are out for blood right now.
They are out for blood right now. And I'm worried about more people getting hurt. And so just be careful about what you're posting online. Be thoughtful about what you're putting out there. I just really don't want any more people to get hurt. It's that simple. And look, one other thing I just want to say about our political leadership and how they have responded to this. There are a lot of arguments from the left about how, why don't you condemn Trump for refusing to turn the temperature down? Listen, I have accepted a long time ago that Donald Trump is never going to be a leader in regard to having cooler heads prevail, turning the temperature down, getting people to calm down so things don't kind of spiral out of control where we have even more violence. It is up to us as Americans to lead by example. It sucks that we can't look to leadership to do what leaders do, but we can be the change we want to see in the world. So we can lead by example and show, no, the American people reject political violence, even when it's directed at the opposite political side, even when it's someone who has said things that we vehemently disagree with. I'm sorry, it sucks. I really wish that we could look to Trump and have the type of president who's gonna try to bring the country together at a time when we are more divided than ever, but we don't have that. And so if we're gonna rely on him, take the lead from Trump, we're gonna find ourselves in quite a bit of despair.
Yeah, so first, we've got a poll on this because it's a tough question, like I said. So I'm always curious when it's such a tough question, what you guys think of it. Should people be fired for political statements they make online? We've got that up on the live chat and we have it up on our website as well. On the website, it's overwhelming no there. And then we'll check in on the live chat in a minute. It shows live 6 to 8 o'clock every day. So first, I agree with you, Anna. A lot of the people that were submitted, they're enormously vague, right? There's the ones who are just awful, making light of his death, etc. There was a group at NYU as they're doing a vigil to Charlie Kirk. They come in and start singing some of the words "Ciao Bella" on one of the bullets. That's disgusting, man. And like, I guess you think, ha, we're so irreverent. Oh, we like the murder of our political opponents. Well, you're not gonna like it a lot when it happens to your side. And you shouldn't like it when it happens to the other side. What's wrong with you? And by the way, you're not on the left if you're celebrating that. You're just not. You're some new radical weirdo group, but the left is not for political violence. I mean, if you can't understand that, you're pretty dumb. But that's a tiny minority. Most of the folks are like, oh, I didn't agree with him politically. Oh, I'm not gonna lionize him now because he said awful things. Or hey, I'm worried about what the right wing is gonna do in reaction. You're gonna try to get people fired for that. Those are relatively normal political statements I would defend on the left or the right, right? And then number two, doxing, that's an easy one. I'm against all doxing, right? So never give anybody's home address or phone number, etc. So sometimes people make up things. They'll say, oh, you named a donor, and donors should all be able to control our politicians in secret, so you dox them. No, that's nonsense. That's not doxing, right? On the other hand, as much as I loathe some of those donors, do not give out their home address or phone numbers. That is doxing. So no matter how terrible the person is, never dox, because it puts somebody in literal physical danger. It's totally unacceptable. So, and then, what if it was one of our own? I mean, are our memories that short? Because up until now in American history, almost all the political assassinations have been of left-wing figures. MLK, RFK, JFK, and the list goes on, right? MLK was, by the way, not a politician and was unpopular for most of the civil rights movement in the country. And so people forget that. Now he's beloved by most sane people, but he was taking on a super tough fight and he had to change the way that people thought. So, Charlie Kirk obviously said some things that were not great about Martin Luther King, and I love Martin Luther King. But for both of them, I don't care which side they're on and I don't care what they said. Murder is murder and it is beyond despicable. I can't believe we have to clarify these things. All right, so to your point about Trump, Anna, look, Trump, for the folks who say like, I can't believe people are being uncivil when Trump's been so civil to you. Come on.
Let's please keep it real.
Yeah, nobody really believes that. You can't, look, there's blindness, and I get it. A lot of people are blinded by their side or their race, ethnicity, whatever it might be, right? But you can't be that blind. But I make a huge distinction between when he's generally uncivil, which I don't mind at all. I think, and I've been the one saying Democrats should stop being so civil, right? And I've been saying that for over a decade. But you cannot cross the line where you call for violence. And how many times has Trump done that? A ton. You remember when he used to say at the rallies all the time, oh yeah, I remember the good old days when they'd get taken out on a stretcher. You should beat them up and I'll pay your legal bills. Donald Trump Jr. thinking, oh, it's so funny, my Halloween costume is bashing the guy who bashed Paul Pelosi's skull in. An 84-year-old man who's hit in the head with a hammer. And yes, if you're saying that some on the right didn't think that was funny or conspiratorial and they were actually lovers and all that nonsense, they did. Now, does that mean all of the right wing thought that? No, just as all of the left wing does not think what the radicals are saying today. But for the two radicals on both sides, they're driving us to hate each other. Don't let them win on that. And finally, Anna, unfortunately, to your point, I mean, even if it wasn't Trump, let's say Biden was in charge. Do you think anybody would listen to him anyway? I mean, he would say, let's have cooler heads and go towards peace. Presumably any Democratic president, or really any president outside of Trump, I hope would do that. Trump, on the other hand, said, it's the radical left and we're gonna go get them. Okay, but even if Biden or Kamala Harris said it, they wouldn't listen anyway.
Look, Right now, Americans are struggling, regardless of where they stand on the political aisle. Okay, they're having trouble making ends meet. Our schools are falling apart. The housing market is a complete and utter nightmare. Young people feel that they have no future to look forward to. And what are the political elite doing right now? They are directing our ire at one another to fight one another. And look, political violence of all forms is absolutely disgusting. But in 2022, I remember a disgusting racist piece of crap go into a grocery store in Buffalo, New York, and gun down 10 Black Americans. That was politically motivated violence. Can we please stop pretending like there isn't a problem in this country on both sides? There is a problem right now. There just is. And unless we're willing to accept that there is an issue here, nothing's gonna get better. And we can kiss liberal democracy goodbye. Because I guarantee you, the authoritarians are watching and waiting for the right moment to come in and strip us of our constitutional rights. So we need to be smart about this moving forward.
Yeah.
But people are angry, so I doubt that's gonna happen.
Well, one quick tangent point here. The right wing is saying on all the shows on social media, et cetera, that the left did this by calling everybody Nazis, fascists, racists, et cetera. Wait, hold on. So put aside Nazi, that's a very strong word, and we try not to use it here unless it's literally about Nazis. So that's why what Dave Rubin did was so disingenuous, right? When we're referring to actual neo-Nazis, right? So, but in terms of racists, guys, we've been saying on this show, even before the election and certainly since the day of the election, stop calling all Trump voters racist. They're not all racist, they're all different people. You've probably heard us say it so many times, you're like, I got it, Cenk, right? But does that mean there are no racists in the country? No, when a guy goes and shoots up a store filled with black people because they're black, when Dylan Roof shoots up a black church because they're black and writes it down in a manifesto, when the guy who went to Texas and shot up a bunch of Latino immigrants because they were Latinos and writes it down in a manifesto, well, is that guy racist? Or the guys who went and targeted synagogues and temples, were those people racist? Well, of course. They wrote it in a manifesto that they were racist, right? So the idea that you shouldn't call anyone racist is absurd. The idea that you should call everyone racist is also absurd. And part of the problem is that no one is doing nuance anymore at all. We've just got both sides saying, nope, I'm gonna find the most extreme person on that side and make them the poster child and pretend that 170 million Americans on the other side of the political spectrum are all evil, all this, all that. And that's what's troubling. I am genuinely.
All right, Cenk. Yeah. Okay, final thing, and we got to wrap up and go to break, okay? But I want to just have the last word on this, please. I want to go to Randy Fine's tweet. Please put that up. It's graphic 6. Randy Fine, who talked about how much he, I guess, feels pleasure over the starvation of children in Gaza, starving children to death. He's all for it. Has the audacity to talk about political violence here. Those celebrating the death of Charlie Kirk must be thrown out of civil society. No, Randy, your fat ass needs to be thrown out of civil society. Okay, the type of person who devalues human life as regularly as you do has no place to talk about civility. Okay, you enjoy violence. You talk about slaughtering children as if their lives mean absolutely nothing. And for anyone trying to launder their reputation and who they really are after the murder of Charlie Kirk, I see you. I see you. Randy Fine is not a good person. Randy Fine is not someone who values human life. He has proven that time and time again. So don't forget about that just because he's exploiting the murder of Charlie Kirk to launder his reputation.
And it's not just that in it. He's also going to then do the thing that Representative Mass is doing now, that Stephen Miller talked about, Rubio's talking about. We're going to give you all those stories in today's show, where they're now going to say, that's it. If you criticize Israel, we think that you're endangering people. We're going to wipe you out. We're going to take away your social media accounts. Clay Higgins said that. We're going to take away your money and power. Stephen Miller said that. We're going to take away your freedom. We're going to eliminate anyone who opposes the establishment, authoritarian rule, Israel, etc., while pretending that they care about horrific murder of Charlie Kirk. He's in favor of horrific murder. He said it 1,000 times. He said that we should starve away. We should destroy all of Gaza. Randy Fine is a person who has celebrated political violence more than any person in this country. And we are not like him. We're not monsters like him. We don't want anyone in Israel getting hurt. We don't want anyone in Gaza getting hurt. We don't want anyone on the left getting hurt or anyone on the right getting hurt. And that includes Randy Fine, because we are not as immoral as Randy Fine. We don't want anyone, including him, getting hurt. He, on the other hand, does not think that. He calls for the death and destruction of his opponents. And that's the kind of sick man Randy Fine is.
All right, we'll be right back.
All right, let's go start with TYT.com first. Maple Flame says, I'm so happy this show hour has come. I appreciate you both so much. We need compassion and decency right now. Thank you. Jeremy says, this is why I'll stick with you all. Realizing a wrong, admitting it, and making a turn makes you part of the solution. Much love to you all. And thank you, Jeremy. And notice that we did that years ago and not when it's convenient. As most prophets said, the powerful want regular people to tear each other apart. Of course. Yes, that's exactly what I'm worried about, and that they're going to take advantage of this situation to make things worse. All right, let me go to Super Chat, because some folks were very generous and a variety of opinions. Eduardo Munoz wrote, in the Catholic Church is teaching violence through the Catechism, page 545, references number 66. This goes against the teachings of Jesus Christ. I read that because he was very generous. What it has to do with this topic, I'm not sure, but I'm not, that's his opinion, not my opinion. I think all the religions have beautiful, peaceful, loving parts. And unfortunately, yes, there are violent allusions in all the texts, in all the major religions. In Liberty and Guns We Trust says, Israel's a major player in the cancel culture. They're also a significant cause of the desensitization online. They've blurred all standards for morality, humanity, respect, integrity, and tons more. And that's what we're going to talk about in the context of Venezuela later in the program. That's what I call the Israelification of the world, which is, hey, if you're strong and powerful, you don't have to follow the law, you don't have to follow morality. You just kill anyone you like, bomb anyone you like, invade anyone you like, and call it self-defense and laugh and just slaughter away. And unfortunately, we've begun to do that with Venezuela, and now I'm worried about what we're doing here at home. Jonah Morton wrote in a couple times, says, Anna belongs here with us on the Young Turks. We have such a great community for years. From a conservative like me to the people like Anna, #we love. Amazing. He also wrote in, I'm on the right wing, and he puts it in quotes. I don't apologize for my politics. I'm likewise against violence of all kinds. I don't feel that's a left or right position. Well, brother,
I agree.
Yeah, brother, that's exactly right. And that's where we used to be. But now, depending on whether you're in power or out of power, all of a sudden it fluctuates a little bit on whether it's violence is okay or not. No, it's never okay. Now, Titan wrote in a couple of times. I hate that this happened to Kirk. I think this is a turning point to an even darker America, but we can't pretend this is new. This is what the internet does regardless of political affiliation. In terms of division, that's true. Certainly the assassination is new. He also wrote in, where was their outrage when it was against the left? Kirk himself said Palestinians don't exist and joked about bailing out the guy who tried to kill the Pelosi's. I don't agree with this, but it is no more than what they have done. So, yeah, but first of all, as we talked about before, that doesn't mean we should do it. And there's a difference between joking about something like Paul Pelosi's death, which I think, a brutal attack, which I think is terrible, and Charlie, Don Jr., and all those guys should have never done that, and the actual murder of Charlie Kirk, right? So, anyway, Konstantin Kavira says, I didn't feel politically homeless. I've got TYT. Well, right there with you, brother. And that's why we try to set up a home here for open-hearted people who care and open-minded people who actually want to learn from one another. We'll be back. All right, guys, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. So I want to tell you about one of our sponsors. We do a lot of work to find the right sponsors for you guys. This one is Chapter. They help you with your Medicare plan. And my parents' plan was a mess. A lot of your folks and some of you yourself, you're not even sure if you got the right plan. So this is easy and free. Just call, 20-minute call, and they help you figure out the right plan. So a lot of the other guys are cheesy, and they're mainly doing it based on commission that they're getting from the plans, and they're not looking out for you. Chapter is looking out for you, and on average, they save $1,100 for the people that call in, and some of our viewers have already written in saying how much they saved for them. So that's super gratifying to us that we found the right sponsor for you all that actually helps you. That's why the number is 707 TYT help. 707 TYT help. Of course, you could just go to askchapter.org/TYT as well. But the number is better, 707 TYT help. Thank you, guys. Anna, what's next?
Well, Kash Patel is getting some criticism, some feedback, if you will, from members of the Trump administration. At least that's according to a special report from Fox News. Let's get to the details.
If I had a dispute with DoorDash and Kash Patel was investigating it, would I get the credit? I imagine I would not. I imagine if there was a discrepancy on a DoorDash order, the head of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Kash Patel, would not be able to secure my credit of $11.90.
Well, comedian Tim Dillon isn't the only one taking some punches at Kash Patel, the FBI director, of course, and his handling of the investigation following the murder of Charlie Kirk. In fact, there's a new Fox News exclusive which alleges that, well, there are very high-level members of the Trump administration who are not pleased with Patel. They spoke to 10 sources across multiple federal offices who all said that Patel is under fire over his handling of Charlie Kirk's murder investigation. So one of these anonymous sources with knowledge of ongoing personnel discussions stated that the White House, Attorney General Pam Bondi, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche have no confidence in Kash. Pam in particular cannot stand him, Blanche either. Now, let's just remember that Pam Bondi kind of hates Kash Patel because of a problem that she created herself by promising the release of the Epstein files, pretending like she had the goods, or maybe she does have the goods, but then never delivering. And apparently behind the scenes, she had a bit of a scuffle with Kash Patel over that issue. So she has, in my opinion, other motivations or other motivating factors. So just keep that in mind. But we also have to be completely fair and honest here. Kash Patel did appear to bungle the investigation in the initial phases, and we'll get to the details on that in just a minute. Now, while Trump has been defending Kash Patel publicly, according to this report, privately, it's a different story. Multiple sources close to Trump acknowledged the president was not thrilled with some past episodes of Patel's performance, including a public feud with AG Bondi over the administration's handling of the Jeffrey Epstein case, which is fascinating because, again, I mean, look, Trump doesn't want the Epstein files to be released. I think that's abundantly clear at this point. Pam Bondi is a huge part of why Trump's base was expecting the Epstein files to be released. So the fact that he's taking Bondi's side over Patel's is really interesting here. Now, Patel has also been widely criticized for his response to the assassination of Charlie Kirk, of course. So he stated that law enforcement had Kirk's killer in custody on the day of the assassination. We can all remember that if we were following the story closely. But it turns out that law enforcement did not have the killer in custody. They had someone that they were questioning, but it was the wrong person. He was later released. And Patel had to essentially backtrack his statement on X and admit that the search for the killer was ongoing. And so an anonymous federal official remarked to Fox News, it was total amateur hour. But Patel did attempt to defend himself during an interview on Fox News this morning. Let's take a look.
When we were still looking for the guy, I know you posted that we got him. And that ended up not being true. You took some incoming because of that. What led to you posting that? Why did you feel so certain about it? And what do you have to say about the criticism?
No, I appreciate this opportunity. Look, as I stated, I was being transparent with working with the public on our findings as I had them. I stated in that message that we had a subject and that we were going to interview him, and we did, and he was released. The job of the FBI is not just to manhunt the actual suspect who did the killing or suspects, but it's also to eliminate targets and eliminate subjects who are not involved in the process, and that's what we were doing. Could I have worded it a little better in the heat of the moment? Sure. But do I regret putting it out? Absolutely not.
Okay, but you made it appear as though the suspect was in custody and later had to retract that statement essentially. And a few final things that I'll mention here that are worth knowing about. So Patel also traveled to Utah, if you guys can remember, a few days ago to basically be part of this press conference that provided updates on the, assassin. But Patel never spoke at the press conference. It was very awkward, very strange, and now we know what was going on behind the scenes. The back-to-back communications fumbles sparked fury from AG Bondi, Deputy AG Blanche, and the White House, multiple sources told Fox. Multiple sources also told Fox that Patel was forcibly instructed not to speak, adding that investigators had still not identified a suspect when the briefing was delayed. Cenk.
Yeah, oh boy. Kash Patel has a number of issues, and I can't tell which one is the real problem for him. I know what I think is the real problem, but I'm not sure what Trump thinks is the real problem, which leads first to an amusing comment from one of our members on tyt.com. Art Guy wrote in, I'm pretty positive Trump will fire Patel, not for incompetence, but for looking bad on TV.
Totally.
Okay, so I'll leave that one right there. Okay, so now to the main issues. One is general incompetence, and that seems like an open and shut case. I mean, look guys, that incident that Anna's describing to you is so embarrassing for the director of the FBI. When real law enforcement has to tell him, listen, clown boy, shut up, okay? You don't know what you're doing, you're gonna ruin the investigation, so hush up. Now, that's the head of the FBI. Normally the head of the FBI tells others that. But since he also knows he's a clown, he's like, oh, okay. And he proved it by, no, we got him. And apparently he was at some fancy restaurant when he got the news. I don't care that he's at a fancy restaurant, he can eat at any restaurant he likes. But brother, take a minute to go figure out what's going on in a situation that is dire before you go blurting things out on Twitter. But that's the problem, he doesn't come from the law enforcement world. He comes from the Twitter world. So he's like, I got this, X, I got him. When you don't even know anything. No real law enforcement person would do that without checking who is it that we got, how sure are we, and confirming that with like 8 different people down the chain. And obviously he didn't do that. So incompetence is a real issue. But internal politics is also a real issue. And I have no idea where Kash Patel comes out on that stuff. And Dan Bongino is another interesting cat. And he keeps saying, things that make you wonder what he means. About this, he kept talking about, well, there could be larger things afoot, and I can't tell you, but we're looking into it. What does that mean? I don't know what that means, right? And I don't think that that's the thing that the deputy director of the FBI should be saying either. But by the way, once they leave office, I would be shocked if they didn't tell us some of what happened behind the scenes, some of it true, and God knows what they add on top of that, right? But this is what Trump signed up for. He wanted a clown show. He hired a bunch of jugglers, and now when they, drop all the balls because they weren't very good jugglers to begin with, people are disappointed in the circus. But you voted for this circus, and in the beginning, people were very excited about Kash Patel and Dan Bongino on the right. Even on the right now, not as excited.
Well, there's another juggler in the pipeline. And so if Kash Patel gets the pink slip, if it's over for him in the FBI, first of all, let me just note, it's unlikely that they'll get rid of him entirely. He'll probably just be demoted. But a gentleman by the name of Andrew Bailey is apparently up for consideration. That's the FBI's current co-deputy director alongside Dan Bongino. Allies of President Trump and Patel's harshest critics have begun to circulate word that contingency plans for Patel's ouster are forming. They also claim his hopeful successor, Andrew Bailey, made clear that he would not leave his post as Missouri's AG or abandon his aspirations to run for state governor, only to serve as Patel's number 2. But once Bailey has served at the FBI for at least 90 days, things could change. He would, in fact, be eligible to fill the FBI director position should it become vacant. And Fox News's sources stated that if Patel were removed, again, he would probably just be demoted, not kicked out of the administration entirely. But keep in mind that the sources speaking to Kash Patel have their own agenda. And I noticed that in this little excerpt from Fox News's reporting. A senior official involved in decision-making at the White House dismissed the allegations as baseless and even wishful thinking from figures who might benefit. This is politics, baby. Once someone in the administration or someone in Trump's orbit smells blood in the water, they're gonna, position themselves for, FBI director. They're going to maneuver in a way that's going to help them accumulate power or get a powerful position. So we'll wait and see what happens. But I am seeing widespread condemnation toward Kash Patel and his handling of, the investigation into the killing of Charlie Kirk.
Yeah, there's the only reason why I'm hesitating, guys. Well, there's 2 reasons. One is that who's going to replace him? Do you think it's going to be someone better? I'm not at all convinced of that, right? But the second reason is because I don't know where he comes out on Israeli politics. So, and Epstein files. So keep it real. We know where Pam Bondi comes out. Pam Bondi's on the side of never release the Epstein files. Whatever Israel wants, Israel gets, right? Marco Rubio's on that side. Many people in the administration are on that side. I don't really know where Kash Patel and Dan Bongino are on that. Of course they said, oh, we want the Epstein files released. They get into government, they go, oh my God, there are no Epstein files. So they look ridiculous, right? But they have significant problems with Pam Bondi. And if you have significant problems with Pam Bondi, you might accidentally be right about a thing or two. Right? So if all we're going to get, excuse me guys, if all we're going to get is more Pam Bondi allies, then, okay, we got Kash, we caught him outside, but then what replaces him might be even worse.
Well, that does it for our first hour. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk about what Congressman Mast was attempting to pass. He's backed off potentially disastrous legislation that I find unconstitutional and un-American. We're going to give you the details on that and more coming up. Don't miss it.
Damn it, they failed us. And if you're not angry about that, Michael, and any of you out there, then you're damn wrong, because you should be angry. Young Turks.
It was genuine. He was mad.
Cenk Uygur, known online as one of the Young Turks, isn't afraid to throw some punches.
3, 2, 1, fade up.
Cenk the Turk Uygur.
What kind of TV station is this? The whole point is for me to yell and scream and tell you what I think.
It was right out of like Wayne's World.
This guy on this little rinky-dink website is speaking truth to power.
We've been averaging 600,000 views a day, beating most of the cable shows in America.
We're the largest online news show in the world.
We're celebrating our 1 billionth view.
Television, we're coming.
More politics ahead with Cenk Uygur.
He knew that the MSNBC
opportunity was an experiment.
And Phil and host beat CNN and Headline News combined. At some point, they want to give me a show.
Every single year that comes out of our paycheck. We put it in, and you're saying we were suckers.
When you, as a host, tells someone you're interviewing to shut up, that's going to raise a red flag.
That guy needed a tall glass of shut up juice.
If President Obama's doing the wrong thing, I'm not going to tell you that he's doing the right thing so I can, quote, support him.
He says to me, "You won't believe the meeting that I just had."
The head of MSNBC talked to me.
And they want him off the air. Cenk took an incredible risk.
We're supposed to challenge the government. That's the role of the media. The Democrats and the Republicans are here to screw you. And who on the air is saying it?
I wouldn't have done what he did.
That if I'm going to be a talk show host, I should be the biggest talk show host in the country. I don't think anyone else does it better. I don't think anyone's even close.
Before you know it, I'll be back on your TV doing a national show. I guarantee it.
Magic. It's showtime. And say 45 minutes. I'm hosting today. Now I know what you're thinking, Jerry, your face is already perfect, but you know what? I still need to apply some makeup. I went through this process, right? A few years ago, when I realized that I was gonna have to put makeup on the show. I had to go through like finding out what my undertones were. You guys know what those are? I got my MAC Cosmetics. It says SPF 15 foundation, broad spectrum. But apparently when I have these red undertones, and I think pores are not supposed to be seen, I need all these things to be confirmed for me. These sponge things don't work for me. You gotta use your hands. This I did. That's how the magic really happens. So we're gonna go through a tutorial how to make the magic happen from beautiful to beautifuler. Let's go. I've already been moisturized. That's the first thing. But moisturization already happened. We go raw. All hands. Pick up a couple streaks. This is the guy way of putting on makeup. We got dots. There's some shiny points that generally happen. First of all, here we go. You dust here. I'm putting way too much, but you dust. Oh, get the excess off. You don't want chunky powder. There's like a T-zone, I think, right? Mine is a double T-zone. Because I went middle and another cross. Make sure your nose isn't all shiny. People get on you for it. You know, say, that's not a good point you made on there, JR. Your nose is shiny. You guys are picky like that sometimes. I think that's about it, fellas and ladies. See you guys next time. Bitsies.
Back on TYT, Cenk, Anna, and Z. Alani, thank you for hitting that join button below the video on YouTube. We appreciate it. You could also do it through tyt.com/join. Anna, what's next?
Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about legislation that was going to be pretty disastrous, but it does appear that this congressman has backed off a provision in it. So let's get to the details. Well, Secretary of State Marco Rubio was about to potentially be empowered to revoke the passports of American citizens who were too critical of Israel. And that's according to legislation that Republican Congressman Brian Mast was drafting and planning to propose. Now, journalist Ryan Grimm has reported that there's been an update to this story. Apparently, he has backed off of that provision, probably because it's, unconstitutional, illegal to force American citizens to say complimentary things about a foreign government that's currently carrying out a genocide. But the fact that this was even a consideration by Congressman Mast, a man, by the way, who showed up to the halls of Congress wearing an IDF uniform, just kind of gives you a sense of how much control this foreign government has over our own lawmakers. And it might have to do something with just how much money they take from the Israel lobby, which is quite a bit. When it comes to Brian Mast, it's to the tune of $700,480 as of March of this year. And Marco Rubio certainly has been enabling anything and everything Israel wants to do, regardless of international law, regardless of the atrocities and war crimes that Israel has carried out. And would you look at that? He has taken even more money from the Israel lobby, more than $1 million as of January of last year. So who knows, the number might be higher. So Cenk, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so here we go. Exactly as predicted, tragedy is used as an opportunity to try to silence people, and particularly their first priority, as always, is silence the critics of Israel. So first of all, Representative Mast is not a US representative. He served in the IDF. He showed up in the halls of Congress wearing the uniform of a different country. That's unacceptable. And he, of course, now this doesn't unfortunately separate him from 90% of Congress, but he thinks we owe Israel pretty much everything. We've given them $310 billion already. We should give them more, endless amount of money. Of course, their genocide and ethnic cleansing is great, etc. American taxpayers to give to the country that Representative Mast actually loves, which is Israel. So you are, by the way, again, you're allowed to criticize the US government, but if we think that you might begin to aid and abet or give material comfort, okay, well, so what's material comfort? By the way, if you aid and abet terrorists, that's actually a crime, and you should be charged with that, because I don't want anybody aiding and abetting terrorists. And then you're gonna have a lot of issues if we have evidence on you. We're gonna put you away for a long time. But the reason to do it through Marco Rubio, as the original suggestion was, is that so you don't have to have evidence. It doesn't have to be a violation of the law, and one person can unilaterally make that decision. And by the way, Israel has critics on the left and the right and the middle. So everybody's on the chopping block. Oh, Charlie Kirk was killed? They're thinking, oh, that's now an excuse, an ability to take away your rights. And again, Charlie Kirk's legacy, a lot of people on the right would say, was about freedom of speech. Whether you agree or disagree with that, certainly that's what Charlie said all the time. And in his way of seeing the world, he was a huge advocate for freedom of speech. And if you use his death to take away freedom of speech here in America, well, you might break the irony record.
And the other thing I want to just note, sure, Brian Mast took that provision out of the legislation he's proposing, the one that would allow the Secretary of State to unilaterally, without due process, strip Americans of their passports if they're critical of Israel. However, I want to kind of get to the root of something that I see as a huge problem in this country, namely the ability of government officials to slap the label of terrorist onto pretty much anyone, right? So basically, Marco Rubio, if that type of legislation were to pass, would be able to revoke passports simply by determining that the individual who's being targeted is a terrorist. But how do you even determine what terrorist is? Like, what is the definition? What are the guidelines that government officials would be using to designate someone as a terrorist? Well, it's pretty vague. Anyone or everyone gets, honestly, these days labeled terrorist in America if they say something that might be inflammatory. Now, Seth Stern, who's the director of advocacy at Freedom of the Press Foundation, told The Intercept that Marco Rubio has claimed the power to designate people terrorist supporters based solely on what they think and say, even if what they say doesn't include a word about a terrorist organization or terrorism. And look, when it comes to material support for terrorism, meaning aiding and abetting a terrorist group or a terrorist, that could literally just mean speech. So the Supreme Court ruled in 2010 that even offering advice about international law to designated terror groups could be classified as material support. The government even deemed a woman who was kidnapped and forced to cook and clean for Salvadorian guerrillas a material supporter of terrorism in order to justify her deportation. So even the designation of a terrorist sympathizer or someone who aids and abets a terrorist group is super vague and can be applied pretty generously to anyone, including someone who's been kidnapped, forcibly kidnapped by a guerrilla group, and is now deemed a supporter of terrorism because of the fact that she was forced to cook and clean for that group. It's crazy, absolutely insane.
In the middle of this super serious story, the idea of her serving gorillas as in apes rather than militants. Okay, if you're aiding and abetting gorillas or orangutans, Marco Rubio and Brian Mast are gonna have real problems with you. Okay, guys, under this interpretation, you could arrest or take away the passport of, and hence in the citizenship of, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Theo Vaughn, Tim Dillon, Joe Rogan, of course us, me and Anna, Piers Morgan now, although he's not a US citizen, so that one's gonna be easy. And by the way, in his last couple of days, even though Charlie Kirk was an enormous supporter of Israel and what they were doing in Gaza, he did question Israel within the last couple of weeks. And he even talked about the power of Jewish donors as it relates to Israel, etc. So it would potentially even apply to Charlie Kirk. I mean, just when you thought they couldn't get any more ironic. No, we have a First Amendment. And I know Israel hates that we have a First Amendment. And a lot of our corrupt congressmen that don't serve this country, corrupt government officials like our Secretary of State, etc. They think there should be an asterisk on the First Amendment, unless you criticize Israel, in which case we're gonna unleash the full might of the American government against you. It's indefensible, except the only people defending it are the people in power.
That's right. Well, look, Mast backed off of it. So at least the passport provision, which was infuriating to say the least. But we should keep a lookout for that kind of stuff, Cenk, because I would not be surprised if it gets brought back up when no one's paying attention.
Yeah, and look, the passport part gets taken out. Although the fact that he suggested it and they were gonna do it until they got pushback is super interesting. And that's why it's important to have allies in the right, because they don't care about pushback from the left. They do care about pushback from the right and sometimes the middle. Okay, so, but the rest of it is still in there. They're still gonna try to find a way for you to be punished severely if you disagree with Israel under the pretense of somehow aiding terrorism. If you're aiding terrorism, we're gonna actually lock you up. But we need evidence and due process for that, because this is still America, barely, but it is still America, as much as Israel and the corrupt US politicians who serve Israel might hate that.
When we come back from the break, I want to talk a little bit about Secretary of State Marco Rubio's visit to Israel and the very clear message he sent to our allies in the Middle East. We'll be right back.
All right, back on TYT.com. So guys, a couple of things. First of all, don't forget we've got a podcasting network. Check that out whenever you get a chance, anywhere you get your podcasts. Number two, we got Ring the Bell right underneath the video as well on YouTube. Helps you keep up with the show and helps the show. And then Shop TYT has the free Palestine collection. And 100% of the proceeds, the profits go to Palestine Children's Relief Fund. And what we want to show there is that good Americans love Palestinians, and we've got no beef with them. We hate that our money is being used to kill them and occupy them and enslave them, and that real Americans are open-hearted and their hearts go out to the Palestinians. That's the shoptyt.com. And again, the proceeds go to help Palestinian kids who've been brutalized in Gaza. Okay, concept of a username writes in from the beginning of the show. Hello all my wonderful TYT family. I hope you are well, happy, healthy, and safe. Though we are in crazy times, we are stronger together. Much love. Thank you for saying that. These are all members on tyt.com. Spliff B Dragon says, I wonder if Cenk is going to address the ambush on Piers Morgan's show last week. I truly felt for him. Tough spot. Cenk's my hero. Thank you.
We should do it tomorrow.
Yeah.
We should do it tomorrow, Cenk.
Yeah, we'll do it tomorrow. Okay.
Yeah.
So Dave Rubin is a terrible person. He's always been a terrible person. He's a giant liar. He's always been a giant liar. That's why I gave him no quarter and never will. Okay. He has no moral character whatsoever. The good news is, as I've said before, yeah, he riled up some folks on the right that don't know who he is. But in terms of even the right-wing pundits, they think he's the world's biggest joke. They're like kind of sickened by him. Don Dada Dragon says, I was thinking about the Charlie Kirk video. I know a lot of people are disturbed by it. When I heard TikTok update their terms of service to no longer allow violent/gory videos, I thought, there it is. There's the Israeli play in all of this. They're going to take not only Kirk's death down, but all the Gaza/West Bank deaths as well. I mean, look, you see the very first thing that's happening after Charlie Kirk's death. We got a couple of days here, the beginning of the new week, that's it. All the Israeli forces inside the US government and inside social media attacking. That says censor, 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 censor. No criticism, no pictures out of Gaza, etc. So obviously they're taking advantage of Charlie Kirk's death, but that's not surprising coming from a government that has slaughtered nearly 65,000 people at a minimum. Brian McGregor says, Anna, you're right where you need to be. We all need a party that responds to the needs of the people, and the number of like-minded voters are growing. The ones who celebrate the tragedy are also lost, but channeling their frustration the wrong way. This can be a moment in America to change the way politics has corrupted the conversation. Hang in there, you have people. Again, I agree 100% with that. Old Woodsman 53 says, I watched several YouTube videos of Kirk's Prove Me Wrong campaign on college campuses. It seems he was very easily owned by anyone reasonably informed on the topic at hand. What I take away from that comment is, guys, what do you need to kill someone for? You just engage them in a battle of ideas. And if you believe in our ideas like we do, we think it's relatively easy. So it's just so counterproductive, and now he's considered a martyr by the right and lionized by most people. So how did that help? All that did was hurt. And besides the fact that it is deeply, deeply immoral. Gary Donahue says, TYT is our safe house where we meet at the end of another crazy day to discuss our feelings and our plans to make things better. I always feel better after our meetings. Back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you, more news.
Well, there is an update on what's going down in Gaza and the Middle East overall because Secretary of State Marco Rubio visited Israel. Let's get into it.
Look, I think we would all, every single person I know, I don't know of anyone who would not rather see a negotiated settlement in which Hamas agrees to no longer be a terrorist group, lay down their arms, free the hostages. So that would be the ideal outcome, one we would all like to see. It's one that's been worked on. But I think we have to be prepared for the fact that savage, terrorists don't normally agree to things like that. But we'll continue to pursue that route. It's the ideal outcome, but it may require ultimately a concise military operation to eliminate them.
Well, unfortunately, the United States is currently in bed with savage terrorists, and that is the current government of Israel as they continue slaughtering the endless amounts of people in the Gaza Strip as they bomb multiple countries, Iraq, Iran, Tunisia, Yemen, Lebanon, list goes on and on. But we're gonna pretend like we're on the side of the good guys. Now that was Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who made clear during his latest visit to Israel that a diplomatic resolution to the genocide in Gaza is unlikely. It probably won't be possible, setting the stage for even more bloodshed. And to be sure, what is currently going down in Gaza City, the absolute demolition and bombing of every single high-rise residential building makes clear that there is no value of human life when it comes to the Israelis and their perspective on the Palestinian people. Now, during a joint press conference today, he and Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, both made clear that the only way the war would stop is if Hamas unconditionally surrender and demilitarize, A Haaretz reporter from Israel actually asked Rubio if that's even a realistic goal. Let's take a look.
And I want to ask if you still think that the military dismantlement of Hamas is possible.
Well, Hamas can surrender tonight if they want, lay down their weapons. The problem is they're a terrorist group, a barbaric group, whose stated mission is the destruction of the Jewish state. So we're not counting on that from happening. We have to remember who we're dealing with here. And that is a group of people that have dedicated their lives to violence and barbarism. And when you're confronting that hard reality, as much as we may wish that there be a sort of a peaceful diplomatic way to end it, and we'll continue to explore and be dedicated to it, we also have to be prepared for the possibility that that's not going to happen.
And this is a perfect time to provide a reminder to our audience that this ongoing genocide in Gaza may have begun as an attack on Hamas following the atrocities committed on October 7th. But the annexation of the West Bank, the absolute terror that Palestinians are facing in the West Bank, which had nothing to do with October 7th, which is not governed by Hamas, makes it clear that this isn't actually about Hamas. The annexation of land in Syria following the fall of Bashar al-Assad makes it clear that this is not about Hamas. This is an expansionist, colonial, settler program, the Greater Israel Project, and anyone trying to convince you otherwise is lying to you. And by the way, Rubio's hawkish comments differ a little bit from Donald Trump, but the president does speak from both sides of his mouth. He had said earlier, earlier this month, he said that a deal to stop the fighting in Gaza would come very soon. I mean, there was no indication that that was true. Right now, you have the Israeli government completely untethered to any responsibility, any consequences. They're literally bombing American allies, and nothing happens in response to that at all. Trump apparently, wagged his finger at Netanyahu and gave him a stern talking to over a phone call, and then continued supplying the weapons for the endless atrocities committed by Israel. Netanyahu, unsurprisingly, was very much on the same page as Rubio. At the end of the conference, he said that he would prefer a Hamas surrender, but that the war wouldn't end unless Hamas was completely demilitarized. And of course, again, this genocide has nothing to do with Hamas. The land grabs that we're seeing right now would indicate otherwise. And of course, Netanyahu is expected to share his plans, by the way, with US officials who are currently in Israel, his plans to annex the West Bank. So let's just call it like we see it. Okay, this isn't about a terrorist group. This is about aiding and abetting Israel's empire building using American taxpayer money, American bombs, and potentially in the future, because they're planning another attack on Iran, American soldiers. Cenk, back to you.
Yeah, so three things here. So first off, as you pointed out, Anna, when Marco Rubio was talking about violent, barbaric terrorists, I kept thinking of Israel, because Israel is, of course, as I've told you many times, killed over 60 times the number of civilians as Hamas has, over 500 times the number of children. So and since their civilian kill ratio is far worse than Hamas's, obviously it's intentional. You don't accidentally destroy all of Gaza. It's obviously intentional. Anyone who isn't enormously biased or a giant liar knows that it's intentional. And so the government of Israel are terrorists. And some of them have actually been convicted of aiding and abetting terrorism before, like Ben-Gvir, even within Israel. So that's clear. Marco Rubio works for Israel. That's clear. He's gotten over $1 million from the Israeli lobby in his career. He's looking forward to getting a lot more when he runs for president. So those not only past bribes, but future bribes. Yes, they're legal bribes in America because of the Supreme Court decisions, but nevertheless, he does work for them, literally. They write checks to him and then he serves them loyally instead of serving our country. So we wanted peace. Now, Trump is a different guy than Rubio. Trump said that he was going to be the anti-war president, the pro-peace president, talked about wanting to win a Nobel Prize. Now, has he lived up to that? In some ways, hell no. He's desperately trying to start a war with Venezuela now for no reason other than the fact that they have a lot of oil and we don't like their leader, so obviously we got to go kill him or something and take their oil. So God help you if you've got a lot of oil, because you're gonna get called a terrorist and we're gonna come after you, right? So that's a second reason. That one has nothing to do with Israel, but it is a very pro-war. He also, of course, Trump bombed Iran. That is very pro-war. But to be fair to Trump, he did try hard to get to peace in Ukraine. And I believe he tried in Gaza, and he sent Witkoff there, and he pushed the Israelis on a number of occasions. But that all changed after Netanyahu's last visit. We don't know what happened there, but Trump went from challenging them to doing the same exact obedient lapdog routine as Joe Biden. I sent him a strongly worded letter, and I called him and I yelled at him. Ha ha. I really showed him. Yes, of course, I'm sending the money right away, sir. No, sir, of course, sir, you can destroy anyone you like, sir, including the peace process. So when they say that all of Hamas has to surrender, that moves us to point number 2. That is a purposely undoable goal. And politicians in Israel, former prime ministers, etc., certainly the press in Israel, many people in Israel have pointed out, wait, that means we're never going to get the hostages back. And we're never going to end this war. Because there is no magical situation where how do they surrender? Do a couple of hundred people, a couple of thousand people come out of the tunnels dressed in their Hamas garb and lay down their arms and go, okay, Israel, you can now kill us? How do you know that's all of Hamas? What if 7 people come out, or 70 or 700? Even if 7,000 came out, do you know what Netanyahu would say? That wasn't all of them. The real leaders and the real guys are hiding. According to our calculations, they don't have 7,000, they have 13,000. So nope, the war continues, because it's literally an undoable goal. You never know if all of Hamas has surrendered. And no one even knows what it means to surrender. Do they just kill themselves? Do they turn themselves into Israeli authorities? What is this? So this is perpetual war. And why? Why does Israel want perpetual war? The whole point of Israel was supposed to be a safe haven for Jews. How does endless war equal safe haven? It doesn't. This isn't about that. This is about greater Israel. And it's not like they're hiding it. And that leads to point number 3. So Marco Rubio says, this Hamas, we can't negotiate with them. We have to murder them all because they want to kill Israelis. So while we're murdering all of them, by the way, we murdered over 64,000 Palestinians at a bare minimum. Now the former head of the IDF admits, we'll get to it in a minute, over 200,000 casualties in Gaza. Who are the murderers, Marco Rubio? Okay, and then he says, and they don't want Israel to exist. Netanyahu reconfirmed, now this is multiple times, and they've already voted on it, but he said it again this past week. He said there will never be a Palestine. Okay, so it is the Israelis who are preventing the Palestinians from existing, the Palestinian state from existing, because they're vicious racists against the Palestinians. They don't believe that they're real human beings. They've dehumanized them, they've slaughtered them, they've starved them, they've occupied them, they've enslaved them. And now we are enslaved here in America, saying, open up your wallets, let's go. Israel wants your money, let's go, let's go. And if you dare to disagree, that's it, we're gonna target you. We're gonna say that, terrorism. You support Palestinians. I can't believe you support other human beings. That's it. Take away, as Stephen Miller just said, your money, your power, threaten to arrest you, take away your passport, deport you, etc. You're not allowed to disagree with Israel. And if you think you have freedom in America, you have freedom with an asterisk, except your entire government will work for Israel. And if you dare defy Israel in any way, we're gonna target you and you will pay for Israel's endless wars. Otherwise, we're gonna call you a terrorist. So that's who this scum Marco Rubio is. He's one of the worst people that has ever been in government. All he does is represent a foreign country and not us. And that doesn't apply to everybody in the Trump administration. Before Trump got neutered, he was actually defying Israel time to time. Steve Witkoff was actually trying to do real peace negotiations. I might not have agreed with his position, but it was a real effort there. Now that effort is over. So the anti-war president is now delivering you permanent war, paid for by us.
So I want to move on to the discussions about the Israeli strike in Qatar, which is an ally of ours. Let's get to those details. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is visiting Israel and had a joint press conference with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, in which they addressed the Israeli strike on one of America's allies, Qatar. Now, they did fail to take out Hamas's leadership in that strike. They did manage to kill 6 other people, including the son of one of the Hamas negotiators and a security official from Qatar. Now, Rubio pretty much refused to respond to any questions about how the United States felt about an attack on one of our allies, which, by the way, currently has one of the largest military bases for the United States. Let's see how that all went down.
Did you ask Israel not to advance with its military maneuver in Gaza and not to repeat of attack in Qatar?
All I would add is that we are focused on what happens now. What happens next? What role can Qatar play possibly in reaching an outcome here that leads not just to the end of this hostilities, not just to the release of all of the hostages, both living and deceased, not just the disarmament and elimination of Hamas, but also a better future for the people of Gaza, which isn't possible as long as Hamas exists, which isn't possible as long as 48 hostages are being held. And so we're going to continue to encourage Qatar to play a constructive role in that regard.
Everything is Hamas's fault. Even when the United States and Israel wanted Hamas to remain in Doha in order to allow for negotiations to take place, it's still Hamas's fault. Everything is Hamas's fault. By the way, what about the funding of Hamas, which was facilitated by Benjamin Netanyahu? That never gets brought up. Never, never. Another reporter asked Rubio if the strike on Qatar created a crisis for American diplomacy, which he completely sidestepped. As for Netanyahu, he claimed that the strike was successful because it sent a message about how they do not respect sovereignty and are willing to bomb any and every country they deem bombable. Let's take a look.
Would you rule out further strikes on Hamas operatives in foreign sovereign countries in the region?
The principle that terrorists should not have immunity wherever they are, wherever they may be, was not established by me. We had a massacre a few decades ago. It's called the Munich Massacre, in which PLO terrorists murdered our athletes to the Olympic Games. And my predecessor, Golda Meir, vowed that we shall track down these terrorists and get them one by one, which is what we proceeded to do in the leading European countries. I didn't hear a great cry of wrongdoing to these countries. So this is a principle we established. It's a principle we follow. It hasn't changed.
Here's the difference between the ridiculous example that Benjamin Netanyahu is trying to compare the terroristic acts his government and military have engaged in striking Qatar, again, a US ally. There was a ceasefire deal that was being negotiated, and Netanyahu intentionally targeted Hamas negotiators because he doesn't want peace. He doesn't want peace. He doesn't want a ceasefire. He wants to steal Gaza. He wants to annex the West Bank, and then he's going to pursue further military action, of course, fought by United States soldiers in Iran. I mean, the blueprint and the plans are being drawn up for that as we speak. He wants to expand to portions of Lebanon, Syria. The list goes on and on. That's what this is really about. And the fact that anyone at this late date still believes a single word that comes out of this terrorist's mouth is so utterly pathetic. And to be honest with you, Cenk, one of the biggest black pills I have ever swallowed in my life is the realization that our government, they're supporting the bad guys. They are aiding and abetting the bad guys. They are stealing American resources, depriving American taxpayers of the resources we so desperately need in order to aid and abet the terrorists, the terroristic regime in Israel.
Yeah. So there's one thing he is right about, which is that this has been a principle of Israel's for a long time, that they can kill anyone they like in any country at any time, and that they are above the law. international law does not apply to Israel. They say we're not going to join the International Criminal Court, we're not going to join extradition treaties, we're not going to join any kind of law that restricts us from murdering Muslims anywhere in the world. Now, sometimes you see the terrible terrorist activities in Munich and you go, oh, well, okay, I get it, man. They're going to want to get those guys and they're going to go, etc. But there is a reason for our laws. So when you're going to do an operation in a foreign country, you must tell them, and you must get their permission, otherwise you're declaring war on that country. Maybe they let it slide in one time, which is a mistake. So it's not a mistake to say, hey, Israel, yes, you found a terrorist in Argentina, in wherever, we give you permission. That's not a mistake. Saying you didn't need our permission is a disastrous mistake, because it opens the door to Israel going, that's it, I don't need anybody's permission on anything. And last time it was terrible terrorists, this time, it's a peace negotiator. Oh, but I don't like the group he's in, so I get to murder him. And by the way, they also murdered the Iranian peace negotiator. You know who murders peace negotiators? People who don't want peace. So this is a deeply terrorist government in Israel. But Anna, I'm at a point where, at this point, unless you're ignorant and arrogant, which is the Israeli supporters in the establishment, everybody knows that Israel's a terrorist state. Everybody knows that they're the bad guys. Everybody knows that they're just killing these poor Palestinians ad nauseum and then calling them terrorists when they've done much worse terrorism against the Palestinians, when they've enslaved the Palestinians for the last 58 years. And they say, we're never going to let them go. And every accusation of Israel is a confession. So they say, oh, look, they're going to try to kill Jews, not just in Israel, but across the world. The Palestinians, all they ever did was take in people that had suffered genocide and Holocaust. They took in the Armenians from the Armenian genocide. They took in Jews from the Holocaust, etc. The Palestinians weren't looking to kill anyone. But Israel says they have the right to murder any Muslim in any country just by calling them terrorists. And guess what? Shockingly, Israel thinks almost all Muslims are terrorists. So, and don't tell me it's not true. They reserve that non-existent right. And they don't allow the Palestinians to exist. And what do they say? Oh, we're worried that they're going to say Israel doesn't exist. Brother, Israel's existed for the last 70 years. It's a nuclear armed country. It has Iron Dome. It's one of the best protected nations on earth. And all it ever does is start more wars, more death and destruction. But it's okay, you can't convince people who are purposely blind. So the people in Washington take money from the Israeli lobby. They're corrupt, period. There is no other reason they support Israel other than the fact that they're crooks and they work for a different country. There is no, like Ted Cruz, I looked in the Bible and it says the government of Israel exists from thousands of years ago and I have to serve it loyally, even though I'm pretending to be a US senator, I'm actually serving another country because of the Bible? Because of the Bible, no. It's all a giant excuse because he got bribed like the rest of them did. So at this point, the jury's in. Everybody knows Israel's the terrorist. And if you don't know that, you're just totally blinded by your bias or you're ignorant. Or you're even worse. You think Israel should be above the law. They should be able to attack our allies. Qatar is an ally. We have an American base in Qatar with American troops. They're potentially the most important ally we have in the Middle East because of that base. It doesn't matter, I get to murder anyone I like. I call them Hamas, I call them terrorists, murder, 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 murder. And 20,000 murdered Palestinian children, but I am the high moral and mighty Israel. No, unless you're an Israel supporter or a crook in Washington or an idiot in mainstream media, literally no one else believes that. The jury is in. Israel is the problem. And we're not looking to be terrorist savages like the government of Israel. I think Israel should exist. I think Israel should be a safe haven. But they want endless wars. And by the way, if you're allowed to murder people in an allied country like Qatar, let alone any other country, that also means you're allowed to murder in America. Now you think they're not gonna do it? They've already killed 10 Americans since 2022 in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. And what has our government done? When they bomb our allies and they kill even American citizens in the occupied territories, our government goes, thank you, sir. May we have another, sir? The American citizens are useless. Who cares about them? Murder away. No consequences, none. Sir, how much more money would you like, sir? Okay, so you can call anybody any names you like. And now when an Israeli supporter is talking and they're labeled people terrorist, anti-Semite, blah, blah, blah. All we see for the rest of the planet is we see a bunch of liars excusing their monstrous actions, pretending that they're superior to everyone else, when in reality, it's one of the worst governments that is creating more conflict than any other government on planet Earth, period. I don't see North Korea attacking 6 of its neighbors. North Korea does despicable, horrible things. And you go, well, that's outrageous. They have camps in North Korea. What do you think the West Bank and Gaza Strip are? They're giant concentration camps where they're keeping 5.5 million Palestinians prisoners for the rest of their lives. And they're saying, if you do anything, not you, if someone in your midst dares to fight back against Israel or does something wrong, let's say it's terribly wrong, we're gonna punish all of you. We're gonna starve all of you because we have you enslaved. So Israel are the enslavers, they are the terrorists. And if you don't like that, you can call me any name you like, but I'm gonna fight for justice, I'm gonna fight for humanity. And by the way, when the time comes, I'm gonna fight for you and for your life and for your freedom and for your ability to exist. But right now, that is not the time. This is the time to fight against Israel because they are the ones starting all the wars. They are the ones who are imprisoning and enslaving the Palestinians. They're the ones attacking our allies. They're the ones murdering American citizens. They're the ones who are completely and utterly lawless, and they demand infinite money. Go work harder, Americans. You haven't given Israel enough money and power to violate every international law. But again, this is now, we're 2 years into a genocide. If you don't know that by now, you're probably a bad person who thinks, Palestinians, Muslims, Arabs, do they deserve to live? Do they deserve to exist? Nah, let's just kill their children. That's a fact. If you're an Israel supporter today, you should get comfortable with that fact because that's what you're supporting, the endless slaughter of Palestinian children. I hope you're proud.
When we come back, Cenk is gonna read your comments, so write in.
All right, let's go to TYT.com one more time and then we'll go to YouTube members. Blair, on a much lighter note, says, Anna, your lashes look fabulous today. Look at that.
Thank you, I spend a lot of money on them.
Okay, paid off. Okay, now back to serious. Michael says, Israel's just creating future terrorists, violence begets violence. Doesn't matter what part of the world, as we should all know by now. Yeah, they're creating future terrorists, but they're also the present day terrorists. So I don't care how outraged anyone is. I don't care at all. I'm gonna keep saying things that are true. Israel has done far worse terrorism than Hamas. That is a verifiable empirical fact. And just saying, no, Israel's our special ally. No, Israel's a moral army. No, the Muslims are terrorists, doesn't change empirical reality. The numbers are in, the jury's in, everyone knows it, other than the ridiculously, absurdly biased who say that Israel should get to murder anyone they like. And if you disagree, anti-Semite, right? Get the F out of here with that anti-Semite talk. The people who say that sicken me. I hope I'm clear. Church of Illinois' Cenk saying, Cenk, are we really still able to criticize the American government? They and Stephen Miller seem pretty thin-skinned at the moment. Well, their first target's gonna be anyone criticizing Israel. Maybe they'll get around to the American government later. But remember, they want to be able to criticize the American government too, in case a Democrat wins, but there's also Democratic senators and congressmen, etc. So that one's a little bit complicated, and it seems more glaring if you try to take away First Amendment rights to criticize your own government. But they're getting us used to it. Remember, Israel is special, Israel's above the law. If you criticize Israel, you should be punished severely. You should not have freedom of speech to criticize Israel. You want to boycott it? That's to take away his contracts. You want to protest it on a college campus? Arrest them, never hire them. Okay, you don't see it? You don't see it? Jesus Christ, man. like I don't mean you guys, I mean the person who wrote it. I mean the supporters of Israel. They can't see that they're vicious bullies. They're unbelievable bullies, but in their minds, and they're genuine, I'm serious. You guys, there's nobody who's comic book evil, right? Or very few, Stephen Miller, fine. Okay, but outside of that, real people, they truly believe they're the victims. They're like, oh my God, I'm such a victim. My feelings were slightly hurt. That's why I get to murder 65,000 Palestinians. Out of here. Jumpin' Jack Flash says, imagine trying to make it impossible for people to leave America because they criticize the foreign country. I mean, Israel get our loser politicians do anything they want. Eclectic Miscellaneous says, there's a non-zero chance that Kash Patel doesn't know what the letters FBI stand for. Don Dada Dragon says, Anna, forgetting finding a home, you are the home. Your voice gives us all hope, belonging, and honestly a bit of safety because you remind us all good humans exist. Anna, you give your heart to the world and your family when you're already going through enough in your personal life as is. As a veteran, I've seen many quote unquote leaders. No leader I know has your heart, your composure, or your commitment to ethics. You might not have a political home, but I thank you for being a beacon that holds her hand out to lift up others. Long live the Queen.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. That's a lot. I don't know if I deserve that, but thank you, I appreciate that.
Yeah, look guys, we appreciate you so much. We love you. Thank you for being a home for open-mindedness and open-heartedness. All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Also, Pamela Hannon and Modern Goblin. And thank you for joining at the premium level. It makes a big difference to us, guys. Thank you for supporting the show. Otherwise, this voice for honesty wouldn't even be here. Anna.
Well, we don't have enough time to do another story, Cenk, so I figured we can spend a little time reading more comments from the viewers. I'm curious what they have to say about what we covered today. And then for our members, immediately following the main show today in the bonus episode, we're gonna talk about yet another Venezuelan boat that was struck, I should say, by the US military. I wanna give you the details on that. And also-
I wanna do the Kilmeade story, Anna. Him saying that we should kill homeless people.
Then we need to keep things concise. So we'll do that. And then if we have time, I guess we'll talk about how pathetic Hakeem Jeffries is. He thinks like empty-headed trolling of Democratic voters is somehow gonna win him support, but it's not. So if we don't get to that today, we can do it tomorrow.
All right, so that's all for the members. It's coming up in the bonus episode. Hit the join button or tyt.com/join. Sid writes in on Super Chat, Anna and Cenk, I respect you both very deeply. May God bless TYT. Very, very nice of you to say that, Sid, really appreciate it. L. Ashley Salazar Schumacher writes in, my home is off the Utah Valley University freeway exit. I saw cars lined up for the memorial and I couldn't help but cry. I cried because of the senseless murder and I cried for my country and the destructive division it's inspired. That's a human reaction. Thank you for telling us about that. And that's a normal reaction. So now when we find people who are acting human, we're like, yes. I mean, in the public sphere, right? So our viewers are just beautiful as usual. Robert DeGucci writes in, Cenk, what took place on Piers Morgan was disgusting. Vinny and Dave Rubin danced on Charlie's grave for an agenda and relevancy. They indirectly blamed you and you didn't deserve that. Stay strong. Well, Robert, I appreciate you saying that. I don't think Vinny was directing it towards me. And Konstantin Kisin said something similar along those lines when he was on the air, but he reached out to me later and said, I didn't mean that. And so no problem with Konstantin, and I appreciate that he did that. That only leaves Dave Rubin, and Dave Rubin is, of course, a deeply immoral and clownish person, and almost everybody in the country knows that. Titan says, Cenk, I want to clarify that I don't think it's okay to celebrate this assassination. I'm just saying this is not new. This happened when the healthcare CEO was assassinated, and both left and right partook in that. So yeah, Titan, I didn't question that, but I appreciate the clarification. Mystic Mac wrote in from Canada saying, please get Syrian Girl on the show, she has great analysis. I'll look into that. I don't know much about Syrian Girl, but I will look into it. And I appreciate you guys reaching out sometimes and saying, hey, I think this person or that person would be good on the show. Titan says, Anna, I felt politically homeless for a while. Our country as a whole feels so mean-spirited. I'm to the point that I want to leave, but at the same time, I don't want to leave America. I don't want to leave. America sucks right now. Look, we're gonna try to bring hope back, right? And that's part of why we do Operation Hope. Check out tyt.com/hope. And I know Titan's on those calls from time to time. Zeldrian says, I refuse to watch our democracy die and turn into a techno-fascist state. I refuse to let the American values that our veterans fought for and died for because some jackasses want power. I refuse to comply. Yeah, I believe that the word for that, the phrase for that is don't tread on me. Okay, so the right wing used to use it when it came to government. In their mind, what was government tyranny, but we see government tyranny around the corner right here. And I agree, don't tread on me. And that's basically in different language that you're using to get to the same point. So look at all these beautiful people who just joined. Fitzu, Shannon, Art Ashbrook, and Simone upgraded their membership. Really appreciate you. And Sid gifted a membership. You guys are amazing. I love this community that you guys have created through your bonds with each other, let alone with us, right? So let's go to YouTube members as quickly as we can. Michael Lamount Sr. said, we love you, Anna. I saw you on Piers Morgan and I appreciate everything you're doing to help turn down the temperature in this hectic political climate. We need to come together now more than ever. Box writes.
Can I just weigh in on that? Yeah. It was hilarious because in the span of a single appearance on Piers Morgan's show, I was accused of being a leftist and also accused of being a right winger. It was amazing. It really was.
More on that in the bonus episode. Hey guys, back on TYT bonus episode, Cenk and Anna with you guys. So look, I already read a lot of comments. I'd love to read more. I'm just gonna touch on the thing that I mentioned at the end of the show. Box wrote in as a YouTube member, Anna getting called left wing by the right and right wing by the left on Piers today was wild. You embodied my spirit animal today, Anna. Politically homeless, just trying to do the best we can. And Diego Shomitz wrote in, stay strong, TYT. Cenk, the Rubin stunt was awful, and I dread what Lindy will say on her take. I think we need to stop debating in existential terms. And
okay, but let's pause for a second. I want to just address Lindy because I got a lot of heat from a lot of different people for even agreeing to go on that show, her take, right? But to Lindy's credit, I mean, she gave me a little tiny bit of hope. I still disagree with her on a lot of things, but she was not on my side when it came to Israel at all. And on air, through our conversations on that panel show, I had finally done a good job in persuading her. I brought her to our side on that issue. Look, it's a small victory, but give Lindy credit for being willing to move on that topic and to do so in a public way where she apologized to me on air. and said that I've convinced her, that she now agrees with me when it comes to Israel. So one of the hardest things that I've been doing is having these conversations in a public way. They get misinterpreted as, oh, Anna's grifting, Anna's moving to the right. I have been open and honest about who I am, what I believe, how I've changed, why I've changed, which areas I've evolved in. I just want people to have at least a little bit of faith in me, right? Like, you don't have to trust me fully if you don't want, but I'm taking a different path from what I had tried for, like, I don't know, 15 years before I finally decided maybe it makes sense to have conversations with people on the right. Because it's not about necessarily convincing Lindy in particular or one person in particular. It's about speaking to a wider audience of people and trying to articulate my argument in a way that might persuade them to join us. You know, that's all it is. It's that simple. Anyway, and by the way, if I wanted to grift, I mean, yeah, it's easy to grift. It really is in this industry. And I've chosen the harder path because I believe in what we're doing. So it's that simple.
Yeah, the grifting path is the Rubin path. Okay, last one is from Twitch. Velvet Goldmine says, how can any other country trust us going forward? Why would they ally themselves with us if we just turn our backs when Israel attacks them? That's a great question. And I don't know if there's a Muslim exception and Israel's allowed to murder our people in allied countries like Qatar, or if they're also allowed to do it in France and Norway. And what if they kill Muslims in France and Norway? Are they allowed to do it then? Nobody knows because they won't follow the law. And we'll never hold them to account. Anyways, all right, let's do the rest of the show.
All right, I wanted to start with Venezuela and then we can talk about Brian Kilmeade's disgusting comments about homeless people. So let's get into it. Today, President Donald Trump announced that the United States military has conducted yet another strike on a Venezuelan boat in international waters. Now, of course, Trump justified this attack by saying 3 confirmed narco terrorists were killed in the strike. So obviously the story is breaking and developing, so we'll learn more details as it develops. But for now, here's what we know. So here's more from Trump's statement on Truth Social. He says, this morning on my orders, US military forces conducted a second kinetic strike against positively identified, extraordinarily violent drug trafficking cartels and narco terrorists. The strike occurred while 3 confirmed narco terrorists from Venezuela were in international waters transporting illegal narcotics, a deadly weapon poisoning Americans, headed to the United States. These extremely violent drug trafficking cartels pose a threat to US national security, foreign policy, and vital US interests. Be warned, if you are transporting drugs that can kill Americans, we are hunting you, he writes in all caps. Now, just like the first strike on a Venezuelan boat, no specific targets have been identified, no names have been shared with the American people. I guess we're just supposed to believe the Trump administration when they say that these are confirmed narco terrorists. And even if they were confirmed to be drug traffickers, standard operating procedure isn't to just kill them all. It's to intercept the boat, do an investigation, detain them. But that's not what's happening here. And I would argue, as I've argued previously, that the US military buildup off the coast of Venezuela indicates that this is really about getting rid of the leader of Venezuela, engaging in regime change. And that would be yet another war that Donald Trump would be dragging the United States military into at a time when war is breaking out all over the Middle East because of us aiding and abetting Israel. You also have all sorts of inflammatory rhetoric in regard to China. You know, we're supposed to have this big pivot to China or big pivot to Asia. And then of course, when it comes to our military arsenal, there have been reports about how that arsenal is depleted because we're of course providing weapons to Ukraine, weapons to Israel, the list goes on and on. So I don't know if engaging in a regime change war in Venezuela is the smart decision to make. And I am concerned about this, but I am curious what you think, Cenk.
Yeah, it's totally unacceptable on so many fronts. First, you said you were the anti-war president. You're obviously trying to start a war with Venezuela. And remember, he tried to start a war with Venezuela last time he was president. So those coup attempts failed. So this time they're trying to provoke Venezuela into responding. The minute Venezuela responds in any way, they're gonna go, that's it, terrorists. We reserve the right to murder them, take over their government, and take their oil and give it to ExxonMobil at much lower rates. I mean, help the American people, get rid of a communist, and it has nothing to do with oil, but yay, drill baby drill, whatever, okay? So look, he pretended he was against the establishment. Coups in Latin American countries so that corporations could have cheaper access to natural resources is establishment 101, neocon 101, the same kind of serving corporate rule, war hawks, etc., that Trump pretended to run against. Proof is in the pudding. So secondly, terrible precedent on two grounds. One is international law. So if we're allowed to murder people without any evidence at all in international water or the waters of a foreign country, then they're allowed to do it to us. I know might makes right. Well, we're stronger than you, so you're not allowed to do it to us. If you do it to us, we'll kill you all, right? But what happens when other countries start doing that? Well, you know what, since there's no laws anymore, Israel won't listen to any international law, America won't listen to any international law. Maybe I'm not gonna attack America, but you know what? I'm bigger than the country next to me, so I'm gonna kill them and I'm gonna take their land and I'm gonna do a coup there and I'm gonna take their natural resources. What? If America can do it, why can't I do it? And now you've got war everywhere. You've got anarchy everywhere. Terrible precedent number two. Oh, they were drug dealers, so we killed them all. Wait, are you allowed to do that? So what if you bring that home now? Well, those guys were theoretical drug dealers. We have real drug dealers here that we have evidence against, right? So is Trump allowed to murder them? Just go into their cells and go, well, I murdered you on open sea, and here you are in an American cell. What difference does it make? Slice their throat, let's move on. What, you said it was okay to murder people without evidence, and in that case, we even had evidence against the drug dealers. You said it was okay to murder drug dealers. So now we're murdering more and more drug dealers. This is an epic disaster. This isn't America. This is ugliness done on behalf of oil companies and the military-industrial complex.
Now, I want to address the first Venezuelan boat that was struck by the US military. Get a load of this.
President, do you anticipate more strikes on Venezuelan drug boats?
Well, we'll see what happens. There's certainly not a lot of boats out there, I'll tell you, since the first strike and then to a lesser extent the second. We don't see any, I mean, we almost see no boats out there, which is fine as far as I'm concerned.
Do you think we will start doing strikes on mainland Venezuela?
Oh, we'll see what happens. Look, Venezuela is sending us their gang members, their drug dealers, and drugs. It's not acceptable.
Those were comments that President Donald Trump made prior to the US military striking a second Venezuelan boat today. Now, yesterday, Trump left his options open when it comes to a strike on Venezuelan mainland, which shouldn't really surprise anyone at this point. Now, meanwhile, Venezuela is claiming that the US military targeted a simple fishing boat, the first boat that was struck. A Navy destroyer approached the tuna boat, which was sailing in Venezuelan waters. Now, I'm not gonna take anything anyone says at face value until I see some evidence, but I do think it's notable that the Trump administration did not name any names as it pertains to the first Venezuelan boat that was struck. They're so sure that that boat contained narco terrorists. Well, why don't you name them? Why don't you ID them? Why don't you give us their bio so we actually know who was targeted? None of that has happened. Now, the boat was then boarded by 18 armed US personnel who remained on the ship for 8 hours. Now, the Venezuelan government is now urging its citizens to take part in a volunteer armed militia in case there's an invasion by the United States military. So they're preparing for war on their soil. And speaking of a potential US invasion, a friend of the show, Ken Klippenstein, who's been excellent on reporting updates on this story, reported the following last week. The Trump administration is weighing additional military options against Venezuela if the regime of Nicolas Maduro doesn't step up pressure on drug cartels, military sources tell me. Attacks could come if Venezuela threatens US forces in the Caribbean, either by shooting down Venezuelan military aircraft or by bombing Venezuelan military airfields. And last week, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, or I should say Secretary of War, released the following message.
To the sailors and Marines of the Iwo Jima, Godspeed. It's an honor to be aboard with you today. You are an incredible representation of America and American power. So I charge you, it's not if, it's when. You're on mission. Narco-terrorists and drug traffickers are on notice. We will no longer allow the poisoning of the American people. And the full power of the American military, used precisely with a clear mission, will be used to ensure the American people are kept safe.
Well, that was yet another piece of evidence that this is the kayfabe presidency. Okay, it's all wrestling theater. It's just so sad and dangerous, and this should concern everyone. Because again, this is not about, the drug trade. The drug that's killing so many Americans right now is fentanyl. The material comes from China, and then it is processed in Mexico and brought over to the United States because unfortunately, there is high demand for fentanyl. Why is that? Why would people need a drug like fentanyl that can obviously kill them? It's because a lot of Americans are in despair right now. And rather than, addressing the root of that problem, Trump is pretending like he is engaging in a war against Venezuela over drug trafficking, when in reality, it's all about regime change in Venezuela, considering they have the largest oil reserve in the world. So,
yeah.
Cenk.
So look, guys, here's how you can tell it's a pretense. So is Venezuela the largest exporter of drugs in the region? Not even close. So look, I don't want to give them ideas about Mexico or Colombia, but does Colombia export more drugs than Venezuela? Yes. So why aren't we threatening Colombia? Because it doesn't have anything to do with drugs. Oh, you want to guess who has more oil, Venezuela or Colombia? Of course, Venezuela. Venezuela is one of the biggest oil reserves in the world. Colombia doesn't. So it ain't about drugs, it's about oil. So there's no question about that. And then you get to what Anna was referring to with that wrestling term, right? I mean, look, when I see that propaganda video with Pete Hegseth, first thing I think of is, I can't believe our Secretary of Defense is a weekend Fox host. Like, this is a joke, man. Normally the Secretary of Defense, and they do terrible things anyway, don't get me wrong, right? But they command some degree of respect because they've had some experience, etc. As he's walking around doing this Hulk Hogan act and all that, it's especially sickening, guys, because they constantly use our troops as sitting ducks. They put them in the middle of the Middle East. Oh, please, Iran attack them, please, so we can have an excuse to wipe out the Iranian regime and do regime change like Israel ordered us to, right? Oh, look at our base in Qatar. Now Israel's attacking Qatar and putting those guys in danger. They put our guys in Iraq in danger, etc. Oh, please attack our troops so we'll have an excuse to do all these wars. Now, go to Venezuela. That one doesn't have anything to do with Israel. But again, what do? They bring in a whole bunch of US military, and they, as you see from the reporting there, they're almost hoping that Venezuela counterattacks, and if they do, that's it. You murdered 13 US soldiers or seamen, etc. That's it. We're now going to have to wipe you out and do regime change. So, but who is the ones who get hurt there? Our troops, our guys. And they're putting them there to get hit, to get hurt. For a war we don't need at all, but apparently the oil companies are demanding. This is what's wrong with money in politics. It leads us to endless tragedies, including more and more war, because defense contractors, foreign governments, and oil companies demand more wars, and they bribe our politicians to get them.
Well said. All right, let's move on to, I mean, you want to talk about the devaluing of human life. You're about to get a prime example of that from Fox News.
They have given
billions of dollars to mental health and the homeless population. A lot of them don't want to take the programs. A lot of them don't want to get the help that is necessary. You can't give them a choice. Either you take the resources that we're going to give you, or you decide that you're going to be locked up in jail. That's the way it has to be now.
Or involuntary lethal injection or something. Just kill them.
Involuntary lethal injection, just kill them. That's what Brian Kilmeade just effortlessly uttered on Fox News as the panel was discussing homeless individuals, some of whom do have severe mental health issues and refuse help when offered housing or mental health services. Now, that refusal is obviously, tragic. You want to help these people, but not Brian Kilmeade. He thinks we should literally kill them. So the comments came as the panel was discussing the murder of Ukrainian refugee Irina Zarutska, who we covered, by the way, last week. So check out that video. This was a lethal stabbing in North Carolina while she was on a train. Now, the 34-year-old DeCarlos Brown was arrested on August 22nd after police say he stabbed the 23-year-old 3 times while she was riding the Lynx Blue Line in Charlotte, North Carolina. Now, the mother of the suspect here, DeCarlos Brown, had said that he shouldn't have been out on the streets, that he had serious mental health issues. He also had a very lengthy criminal record. Brown's mother, Michelle DeWitt, told local television she sought an involuntary psychiatric commitment this year after he became violent at home. Doctors diagnosed him with schizophrenia. So that was the context of the discussion. Now, during that discussion, as you heard, Lawrence Jones, started to make the case that, look, something needs to be done. You can't just allow people suffering from severe mental illness to roam the streets, potentially harming themselves and harming others. And that's when Kilmeade made this inflammatory statement.
We don't have to, we feel so compassionate because you see the mental health crisis happening.
Exactly.
But it's not our job. We shouldn't have to live in fear while they figure out what's going on right there.
Right.
Put them in a mental institution, put them in a jail, and you guys figure it out. But people having to duck and dive on the trains and the buses, walking through the street, this is one case, but this is happening all across the country, and it's not a money issue. They have given billions of dollars to mental health and the homeless population. A lot of them don't want to take the programs. A lot of them don't want to get the help that is necessary. You can't give them a choice. Either you take the resources that we're going to give you, or you decide that you're going to be locked up in jail. That's the way it has to be now.
Or involuntary lethal injection or something. Just kill them.
Yeah, Brian, why did it have to get to this point?
Right. I would say this: we're not voting for the right people.
So look, I mean, both Ainsley and Jones appeared to just kind of brush over the comment, not even acknowledge it. But look, Jones seemed a little bit shocked by what Kilmeade said. So just take a quick look at this video.
Either you take the resources that we're going to give you, or you decide that you're going to be locked up in jail. That's the way it has to be now.
Or involuntary lethal injection or something. Just kill them.
Yeah, Brian, why did it have to get to this point?
Right.
Okay, the look on his face, like that realization that he's in a room with a literal monster who thinks you should murder homeless people if they reject assistance. Wow. So, like we said, following the broadcast, Kilmeade was met with a lot of backlash, understandably so. Representative Don Beyer of Virginia posted the following: America's homeless population includes over 1 million children and tens of thousands of veterans, many of whom served in Iraq and Afghanistan. Nobody deserves to be murdered by the government for mental illness or poverty. These Fox hosts are calling for mass murder. It's sick. I agree with that. Now, author Shannon Watts also posted, Kilmeade is advocating for extrajudicial killings on Fox, yet Matthew Dowd was fired by MSNBC, pointing out Charlie Kirk's dangerous rhetoric. This moral asymmetry in the media and online is destroying democracy. And look, I actually think that is a bit of a fair point. I mean, if the MSNBC employee gets fired for pointing to some of the inflammatory statements that Charlie Kirk had made in the past, how is it that a host on Fox can literally call for the murder of homeless people, and that's totally fine? No consequences. Now, he did get some enough backlash where he issued an apology. I just want to go to the last video. Take a quick look at this.
In the morning, we were discussing the murder of Irina Zaruska in Charlotte, North Carolina, and how to stop these kinds of attacks by homeless, mentally ill assailants, including institutionalizing or jailing such people so they cannot attack again. Now, during that discussion, I wrongly said they should get lethal injections. I apologize for that extremely callous remark. I'm obviously aware that not all mentally ill homeless people act as the perpetrator did in North Carolina, and that so many homeless people deserve our empathy and compassion. Lawrence, back to you.
All right, thanks, Brian. I'll see you tomorrow.
So look, he issued the apology after he got a lot of backlash, Cenk, and it is pretty rare for anyone at Fox News to apologize for anything. I don't think they would apologize if it was just the left that was outraged by this. I think that everyone of all political persuasions found that comment disgusting, and that gives me a little bit of hope in the country. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so first, I noticed the same thing about Lawrence Jones' reaction. He's like, yeah.
Totally, yeah.
Right? It's like that was kind of in the middle of a super dark story. That was kind of amusing. All right, to Kilmeade, I would have thought that he would come out and say, no, I meant lethal injection to the guy who killed the other person, right? No, apparently he meant in general. I mean, that's what he said. But I would have figured he would at least use that as an excuse, but he didn't. So yeah, he meant in general. Wow. And to your point, Anna, I think there's two reasons why he came out and apologized, which is very rare on Fox News. Number one, Republicans also have family members who are veterans and on hard times and who might have become homeless. That's not a partisan issue, that's not a political issue. So probably a good number of people wrote in, at some point I was homeless or a family member was homeless. This is beyond callous, right? And of course, the second thing that happened, and to be fair, I don't know the timeline well enough to know if the Charlie Kirk thing happened in the middle, right? But I know that, of course, after Charlie Kirk was killed, there was a lot of people paying attention to calling for media figures, calling for folks to be killed. And that is not a good look in that context. So I don't know if that affected the situation at all. But bottom line is, look, I'll give him massive discredit for what's apparently in his head and just about as ludicrous and ridiculous and terrible a thought as you could have. And I'll give him a little bit of credit for the apology. That does matter and doesn't make it all go away, but at least he did that, which we don't always or often get these days.
Yeah, I guess. My bigger issue, Cenk, is we're now living in a culture where human life doesn't mean much. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Where,
yep.
And I hate it. I hate it so much. I really do. These are human beings, and you don't know what their story is. You don't know what they've been through. My absolute closest best friend, she's a social worker, and I remember her telling me about a client, no personal details, just like in general. Like there was a client she was struggling with because he was a young man, came from a wealthy family. But you don't get diagnosed with schizophrenia until you're like in your early 20s. So he had a great life, and then boom, in his early 20s, he gets diagnosed with schizophrenia. And he was in denial about it and refused to take his medication and ended up on the streets. That person does not deserve to be killed over his mental illness. And finding the right solution, finding the right balance is difficult. I will acknowledge that. But we have to approach this very real crisis in the country from a place of humanity. Because when you start to dehumanize people like this, we've just totally lost the plot. The things that used to make this country great, gone. We're supposed to value human life, not just throw people away because they have a mental illness, and in the midst of their mental illness, refuse assistance from the government.
Yeah, so real quick, last two things. Yeah, I told the story before. I've got a loved one who had schizophrenia, and if you said to me, give him freedom and let him go on the streets, I'd say, what, are you nuts? What does that mean? That's not a real thing. No, we need to get him help, okay? And we did. And by the way, he's better now. And so, Brian, we didn't have to kill him, okay? But I do believe in involuntarily committing some folks if they're not doing things that help themselves, or or they are actively doing things that are putting themselves or others into danger. But Anna, you're so right about the dehumanization. Now it's like, okay, killing is the right answer. I forgot the question. And no, we've got to be able to, empathize with one another and go back to decency and humanity. So that was a particularly ugly moment there on Fox News.
Yep. All right, I gotta go. But thank you, everybody. I never know how to end things.
No, I got it. So tomorrow, as Anna told you at the end of the regular show, we're gonna do the story of Hakeem Jeffries taking on a Democratic senator. Apparently, unity is not that important, okay? And so that's a super interesting story. But right now, stay right here because we're gonna take a quick break, and afterwards, I'm going to. I always forget if we're doing this live. I should. Certainly, yeah, we are, right? I should always ask Edwin. Anyways, Zachary Karabell, he's known as the edgy optimist. And if ever there was a test of an optimist, this is the time. So it's gonna be a really interesting conversation. Stick around and we'll do that for you guys next. Thank you, Anna. All right, back on the Young Turks. Now we're talking to Zachary Karabell. He is known as the edgy optimist on Substack, and that's really challenged in these times. At the end, I'm going to show you, he really is the most optimistic man in America. There's a hilariously ironic thing that proves it. But first, Zach, welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks, Chuck.
All right, so you and I are both optimists, right? We've talked about this before. And I talk about it on the show a lot. But boy, is this challenging times for optimists. So, okay. Now, I know the big picture, and we'll talk about the big picture, but this moment here in American politics, I gotta start with, are you still optimistic?
So first, let's define optimism. My version of optimism is not like things are great and we're just getting it wrong by thinking things are bad. Like that's Pollyannish BS. That's not. That is a definition of optimism. That's not what I think of when I think of optimism. To me, optimism is we don't know what the future holds and we don't know what in the present is going to construct the future. And so this kind of relentless assumption that we know future outcomes of present events or that we understand the trajectory that we're on is a sort of arrogance, and that we need to be more humble about not knowing about what in the present is actually going to be determinant in the future. So think about it. If we've been having this conversation 5 years ago, well, we would have been having it in a similar fashion because you do this in Zoom and YouTube, and that would have been a new thing because we would have all been in the midst of various forms of lockdown and or COVID protocols at a time when we assumed still in the fall of 2020 that COVID as a thing was going to change the world potentially forever. People weren't going to go back to work. The nature of human social interactions was going to be permanently changed. Travel, you name it. There was a widespread assumption that this was a turning point in history. And whatever else COVID was, and I'm not really making a political statement, it sure wasn't that, right? History did not turn. So you read news today, you read headlines, and there is a widespread assumption that the present augurs a dark future. And because if you sort of do the dotted line forward, that may be where you get. And I'll just borrow from something today because it's kind of in the news. The Congressional Budget Office is constantly in the process of making predictions about future parameters, future outcomes of current spending, and they're always wrong, right? Because they're just doing a dotted line assumption of if the present were to continue in an unbroken path into the future, this would be the outcome. The thing is, that's never what happens. And yeah, it could all be a lot worse, right? Meaning, I don't know that the present isn't the hinge point of a darker future for the world, for the United States, for global trade, for democracy, for human rights, for climate change. I don't know. And nobody does. But the certainty that we know what future outcomes are doesn't serve us well. And at least in my opinion, increases the likelihood that we are going to create a future of our fears, the dystopia that we expect, and not the utopia that we aspire to.
That's a really powerful thing there at the end there. So let me give an analogy to the audience here and then run it by you, Zach. So sometimes I'll do live betting, starts out curious already, right? In the middle of a football game or a basketball game, I'll see that the better team is down on the scoreboard. And sometimes I'll be watching with other people and they're like, oh, they're toast. And I'm like, no, they're just down. We're in the second quarter, right? That doesn't mean they're out. And I'll go and bet on the favorite, right? And that's a pretty decent strategy, doesn't work all the time, and that's the point I'm getting to. And as it turns out, oh yeah, sometimes things turn around. And the present moment where they were losing is not determinative. And made good money on the Kansas City Chiefs. If you think they're down and out, they might be down, but they ain't out, right?
Right.
So on the other hand, sometimes you'll do that bet and they'll continue down, right? And because we don't know, which is exactly the point that you're making here. So now, having said that, Zach, if you were to bet on America right now, I mean, we are in pretty dark times. So
I mean, then the question, Cenk, is like, what America are we betting on? And if I was going to bet on the stock market, I'd probably keep betting on the stock market because the stock market represents global capitalism. And even if the democracy is screwed and the climate is baked, global capitalism as a system is likely going to do pretty well for the next 5 to 10 years. I mean, we can talk about whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. But you're like, what are we betting on? Are we betting on American democracy? I think one of the things that we continue to not grapple with, and you and I have talked about this, right, is part of my optimism about the future is actually predicated on a much more complicated, I don't know, maybe even pessimistic read of the American past. Meaning, I think that the American past has been endlessly retold as a fairy tale bedtime story about how the goodness of humankind has triumphed and freedom has reigned, and Watergate is retold as a story of how the system worked, right? It's not told as it came pretty close to not working. It just happened to have worked. And you can go through the whole list, whether it's, Jim Crow, slavery. And I'm not actually then saying, well, all of American history is negative. I'm saying we tend to either oscillate between all of American history is awful or our entire story is a redemptive uplift of human progress. And I think the story is much messier and the story's often been uglier. And so when people confront the ugliness of the present, they often do so ahistorically, right? With an assumption that things were great then and they're bad now. And often for the right, it's like it was great in the 50s and it was great in the 80s and it sucks now. And for the left, it's like it was great in the 70s and it might have been okay in the 90s and it sucks now. So there's a different moment in the past that different political parts of the spectrum romanticize, but they all romanticize it. And the net effect is it's like a constant Groundhog Day where Americans wake up and they're shocked that there's gambling in Casablanca. They're shocked that there's racism. They're shocked that there's autocratic tendencies. They're shocked that there's anti-immigration sentiment. I mean, you and I have talked about this. There's been a lot of anti-immigration sentiment in American history. There's been 1924 Immigration Act and exclusion. There was incredible anti-Irish, anti-Catholic racism in the 1850s. There was incredible anti-Chinese racism that led to the Chinese Exclusion Act in the 1880s. There was, years and decades where you could not emigrate or there was incredible discrimination. And so we do oscillate. And the idea that this has just been some open Emma Lazarus country where bring us you're tired, you're hungry has been the dominant theme is just not true. It has been a theme and a very powerful theme. And I'm not, it's like you constantly have to say yes, but when you have these conversations to assure people that you're neither talking America down nor talking America up. And so I think that, the present is a little bit anomalous. I don't think there's ever been a more intense agglomeration of people with an incredible chip on their shoulder who are really pissed off at perceived and real slights over decades to their reputations and ideas assembled at the same time in the executive branch. Like that's kind of new.
Yeah.
But like those voices have been there. They just haven't been there en masse in force with quite the same intensity.
Yeah, so I'm always reminded of the quote, wrong forever on the throne, truth forever on the scaffold, but that scaffold sways the future. And so, and there's that.
Good line.
Yeah, well, I got it from Martin Luther King.
Still a good line.
Yeah, and I think he might have gotten it from the Bible, but he was a reverend after all. But the point of that is that in the short term, things usually look dark. Not always, but usually, right? And that there's always something going wrong and usually a couple of significant things going wrong. But magically over the course of time, without us kind of noticing it, things have gotten better too, right? Doesn't mean that all the problems didn't exist and it doesn't mean that all the future problems were wiped away. But over the course of the last 200 years, Zach, we've had tremendous progress, haven't we?
Yeah, and look, a lot of that is material progress. And there have certainly been writers who've pointed to this over the past years, like Steven Pinker, who have then been the target of a lot of, if not ridicule, animus in that absolutely material progress is not sufficient for societal contentment. And maybe the nature of capitalism, some of the nature of American democracy has overly focused on material matters and probably not focused enough on community, on values, you name it. There was a famous speech by Robert Kennedy, really, I think less than 2 weeks before he was assassinated in June of 1968, where he excoriates the reliance on GDP as a litmus of American success. And unlike you, I can't remember the entire speech nearly as well, but the gist of it was that GDP became a marker of societal success, and yet it measures everything except for the things that you would most want to measure, like quality time with your family, a beautiful sunset, building a community. And he has a whole really elegiac list of all the things that GDP can't measure, doesn't measure, won't measure, and that therefore we leave out of the equation of human success. On the flip side, there's like no comparison between being alive today in terms of rights that ones enjoy, net, material affluence, longevity, and even if all these things are now being questioned, the progress of vaccines being questioned by RFK, the nature of how much health and material security is a birthright if you're a citizen of an affluent country, a question that has continually been asked in the United States and Western Europe, but has never been really answered sufficiently, meaning like what's a baseline that we think everybody should have, and then the chips will fall where they may. But freedom from disease, freedom from want, freedom from hunger, you could go on and on about diet. And it's funny, when I answer these questions, I made this point a couple months ago at a conference. Every time you say something like, there's freedom from hunger, more people have caloric abundance than ever before, our challenges today are largely obesity, not starvation. In the context of contemporary society, there's a demand that you do a yes, but. Like, yes, but there's still a lot of people living below the poverty line. They're malnourished, they're living on junk food. They may have sufficient calories, but a lot of those calories are hollow calories. If you make a negative statement, like crime is soaring in this pocket of Memphis, which is clearly what the current administration is saying, there seems to be no requirement to do the yes, but. Like, well, actually, most American cities are safer than ever, except for, maybe there was a peak of safety in 2019 that we're getting back to after a dip during COVID. So positive stories of human success demand a caveat in our contemporary culture, as if you make a generalization about human success and it's good, you need to then acknowledge all the things that aren't good. If you make a sweeping statement about all the things that aren't good, of which there are many and manifold, and part of my point about edgy optimist is, if we are all screwed by climate change, the erosion of democracy, the rise of autocracy, tariff barriers, the end of global trade, the end of liberal society, society breaking apart in a social media maelstrom of hate and misinformation, and that's going to augur kind of the breakdown of societies writ large, it won't be for lack of many people saying so. No one's going to wake up in 10 years and go, oh my God, I had no idea, no one warned me. But we do chronically not focus on things that are going well, and in that sense, I think we at least owe it to ourselves to do that. And it is, I mean, it's I can't do anything about it, but it's absolutely true. You cannot make a sweeping positive statement about the arc of society without caveating it with something that's wrong.
Yeah, and it's not just material wealth that's improved over the last 200 years. We've doubled our life expectancy. We're literally living twice as long, right? And I know you talk about that all the time. And I saw your panel in the Aspen Ideas Festival, and it was great. And I think your point about, yeah, but we never get a yes, but on the bad news is terrific. And so, although there is one place we did it, which is here. Crime was terrible in 2019 to 2023. Yes, but it went down significantly in 24 and 25. So we have one instance.
Absolutely.
In recorded history. All right, anyways, but you mentioned capitalism there. I saw in your last article, The Virtues of Discontent, about how only 54% of Americans now have a positive view of capitalism, which is amazing for when you and I grew up, right? That would have been the most shocking stat of all time. While 39% expressed some support for socialism. What do you make of that, Zach?
And by the way, the numbers skew even more partisan. So I think it's 40% of Democrats have a positive view of capitalism and like 70+ of Republicans. Part of what I was trying to point out in that article is the problem of isms. And I've been focusing on this for a while, that we use isms, fascism, capitalism, liberalism, socialism, as if they have clear, specific, narrow meaning. And then we start arguing about the virtues or the vices of those isms. So you take capitalism, which is a system of material gain hinging in part on individual property rights, that you can own and have claim to property, intellectual property, physical property, corporate property, you name it. Even that definition is not what people necessarily think of when they think of capitalism. I think many people just think that the United States is a triad of capitalism, liberalism, and democracy, full stop. And that anything other than that, if you argue it, is bad or wrong or other, without recognizing that none of these are clear Platonic categories. They may be clear Platonic categories, but they're not clear realities. So the United States is not a pure free market, which pure free marketers have been railing against for decades. Milton Friedman, famous University of Chicago economist, spent a career fulminating against how uncapitalist the United States had become in the 20th century as the government became larger and more regulatory and agencies grew and all the attendant things that we're now quite familiar with that most Americans accept. So even the Americans who are skeptical of, even the Americans who are deeply supportive of capitalism tend to be hugely supportive of Medicare, somewhat supportive of Medicaid, very supportive of Social Security. There was a great, remember this? There was a great protest at the time of the passage of the Affordable Care Act, the Obamacare, where there's a sign of someone protesting it where it said like, government hands off my Medicare, which is one of my favorite, you gotta be kidding me moments. There's an immense amount of socialism, meaning we have socialized public goods in the United States to a degree. Not nearly to the degree of like the National Health Service in Great Britain, but we're not a pure system. We have socialized medicine, badly socialized medicine, incomplete. It's this weird hybrid of public and private that kind of at times leads to the worst outcomes and the highest costs. Social Security is a transfer payment of us to them, us being whoever's currently paying in and them being whoever is currently cashing out. That is not a free market system. That's not a capitalist system. You won't find a mention of Social Security or public health care in Adam Smith or in any acolyte of free market capitalism. So we don't live in clear black and white systems. We live in gray systems, maybe not in North Korea and maybe not in failed states, but certainly in the United States. And part of what I was trying to point out is the debate over are you confident in capitalism is basically, are you confident in the system, whatever the system is? And there's a lot of reasons that people aren't and young people aren't and all of it, but I don't know that everyone is so clear about what these isms actually mean. And part of my point in the piece was, I think some of the discontent of like, I'm dissatisfied with the status quo, or I'm dissatisfied with the world I've inherited if you're Gen Z or if you're, a young millennial is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to be discontent, to believe that things could be better, to believe that the system isn't working the way it should, and that we should do something passionately, urgently, and effectively to change it. Like that's a good thing. Apathy is a bad thing. Passion to change something, the belief that things could be better, those are good things if they are channeled constructively.
See, that's why I think you might be the only person who beats me in optimism. That you take the discontent as a sign of optimism. Oh, good, there's discontent. Okay, in fact, I'm gonna read you the last sentence in that article that I mentioned, The Virtues of Discontent. As for me, I celebrate the dissatisfaction as a sign that apathy does not rule and that people remain engaged in the ongoing experiment to create a world of less friction and more balance. Okay, so that's nice job of winning the championship of optimism. But it's true, I get it. As a fellow optimist, I get it. Because if we're not dissatisfied. We're not trying to improve the system to make things better. And the only way to make them better is to be dissatisfied enough to take action, right? And so, and that sign, by the way, was as far as I remember, get your government hands off my Medicare, said by a guy who presumably is deep-seated capitalist at a right-wing rally, right? So there's great ironies there. But that brings us all the way back around to FDR. So last thing here, Zach. So, FDR, there was a coup attempt against them, and if it wasn't for Smedley Butler, we might not be a democracy today. And so it's
General Smedley Butler, one of the great names in American history.
Yeah, one of the great people in American history, one of the great names in American history. He could have, or at least let's put it this way, he could have single-handedly ended the country, and he didn't. We'll take it. It was a good victory. But for the grace of God goes, a non-democratic country here in America. And we could have gone in a super dangerous, remember at the time, fascism is ascendant in Europe, right? So we could have gone in a disastrous direction, but we didn't, we dodged that bullet. Now, the only question that remains for me as an optimist is, I think that if we make it to the long term is definitely going to be better because we keep learning and learning and learning and getting better as we go, even as wrong is forever on the throne. The only issue is if we have a black swan moment where Smedley Butler goes in the opposite direction and then things don't get better, right? So what to you are potential signs of a black swan moment where you go, we just crossed the Rubicon and now I'm worried?
The monsters under the bed are endless and many. And if you start going down the path of the hypotheticals that could go wrong, those are almost endless, and it can lead you into the proverbial hall of mirrors. So I'm gonna make 2 points quickly. One is there's a lot of comparison today saying that people who watched what went on in Hungary or Turkey or Poland or any number of places where there has been quote unquote democratic backsliding feel like the echoes of that are very familiar now in the United States. The pushback to that is there was no country in the world that democratically backslid that had a democracy that was functional for more than 15 or so years. And that includes Weimar Republic, it includes all the democracies of Eastern Europe in the 1890s. The United States has had a functionally dysfunctional democracy for what is now coming on 230 plus years. And by dysfunctional, I mean, it wasn't that democratic in the 1790s and 1800s. Women couldn't vote, blacks couldn't vote, slaves couldn't vote, non-landholders couldn't vote, indentured servants couldn't vote, you name it. The franchise was limited. So democracy has increased with stops and starts. It is deeply entrenched. Does that mean it couldn't go away? Does that mean that we are not vulnerable to the black swan events? Absolutely not. That gets back to where we began our conversation, which is that the future is unknown and many things are possible, but not everything is probable. And the line between possible and probable that gets blurred increasingly in the shouting match of the internet is a problem. Things that are just possible start to feel probable, and that's a problem. The most black swan thing that would make me concerned, but maybe not, break the glass, is if free speech were radically curtailed. And the reason why it would not necessarily make me break the glass is that there's a lot of restrictions on free speech in India, which is a democracy, a really problematic one, with Modi being a way more effectively autocratic than Trump probably ever will be, but certainly as much as Trump certainly wants to be. It's still a democracy in India, even with the curtailments of free speech. And we don't come anywhere near that now. I mean, we have nearly unfettered speech. Now that can allow for corruption, it can allow for abuses of power. It's not a panacea or a wall that protects against all the ugliness that is America. But in terms of just sheer freedoms and a system that allows for change and voice, the fact that you and I can have these conversations is absolutely vital. And the fact that there's constant threats to that is absolutely clear. There are in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination, to the degree to which people's speech is being silenced because people don't like the speech that they are saying in the wake of that assassination. But for the most part, we're not there yet. And even if we were to start to be there, I would think about the India example, which is even that shouldn't be oh my God, we're done. There's a lot of things, there's a lot of dominoes that would have to fall, and we don't have time to chart them. And I'm not necessarily sure one should, because we live in the reality of the present and not the hypothetical of the future. And unless your job is, to guard the fence against all the enemies and all the problems, in which case it's your responsibility to think of hypothetical scenarios like cyber attacks and protect against them. I don't think we're there yet. And I'm not interested in spending too much time imagining all the dark pathways, because doing so cancels out imagining all the bright pathways. And that's just as vital.
Yeah, so I'll end on a couple things. First, check out The Edgy Optimist on Substack. And so it's a really interesting read and unique. It's a good light in the darkness, right? And secondly, don't forget what Zach is saying here. Sometimes the doom and gloom turns into a self-fulfilling prophecy because you're so worried about the other side that, and fear and hatred begins to set in, and it becomes that prophecy you were worried about in the first place, right? So that doesn't mean you don't do anything. No, go out there and fight for a better world and for positive change, but do that with hope in your heart. Otherwise, we go in the wrong direction. All right, Zachary Karabell, Edgy Optimist on Substack. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Cenk.
All right, guys, we'll see you tomorrow.